My toxic father suspended me without pay to protect my incompetent brother's fragile ego, completely unaware that by locking me out of the company servers, he had legally terminated my contract. He had no idea that his petty punishment just triggered a constructive dismissal clause, allowing me to walk away with a $1.25 million buyout and the exclusive patent to the technology keeping his entire real estate empire from collapsing. Original post. I am Elias, 34 years old. For the better part of a decade, I poured my blood, sweat, and absolute soul into our family's multi-million-dollar real estate development firm in Seattle. And exactly 3 years ago, my own father suspended me from that very company, demanding that I apologize to my utterly incompetent older brother, Tristan. I was standing in the middle of our executive boardroom, desperately trying to save our entire company from a catastrophic breach of contract on a massive, high-stakes cliffside estate project. Instead of listening to reason, my father looked me dead in the eye in front of the board and told me I was suffocating the company with my negativity. They laughed at me. They stripped away my dignity right there in the executive suite, treating me not like the lead project director who kept their empire standing, but like a disposable mechanic who was speaking out of turn. But there was one massive, undeniable thing they didn't know. The revolutionary core technology they were relying on to build their massive wealth didn't belong to the company at all, it belonged exclusively to me. And right now, the very same men who told me to get out, who threatened to bury me in legal fees, are facing total financial ruin, practically begging me to save their hollow legacy from the ashes. Let's go back to the morning everything shattered. The morning the silence in the room changed my life forever. The conference room fell absolutely silent after my father delivered his verdict. It was a heavy, suffocating kind of silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes your heart beat in your throat. The central air conditioning hummed faintly in the background, a low drone that seemed to mock the absolute stillness of the room through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The entire Seattle skyline stretched out, gray, towering, and imposing against the relentless Pacific Northwest rain. I had spent countless hours staring out at those very buildings, analyzing their structural integrity, admiring the sheer force of human will required to raise thousands of tons of steel and glass into the clouds. But in that agonizing moment, all I could focus on was the cold, hard surface of the mahogany table sitting directly in front of me. 2 weeks without pay for undermining your brother's authority. That was the official sentence my father, Richard, had just pronounced with the gavel of his voice. My brother, Tristan, sat directly across from me. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive tailored Tom Ford blazer that probably cost more than most of our junior architects made in 3 months of grueling work. He was smirking. It was a slow, arrogant, utterly venomous smirk that twisted the corners of his mouth upward. He sat back in his plush leather chair, steepling his perfectly manicured fingers, just waiting. He was waiting for me to break down. He was waiting for me to beg for my job, to plead for my salary to be reinstated, or perhaps to scream in red-faced frustration and prove them right about my supposed emotional instability. I didn't do either. I didn't raise my voice by a single decibel. I didn't shed a single tear. I just stood there breathing evenly, feeling a strange, absolute, and terrifying calm wash over every nerve in my body. I looked down at the blueprints scattered on the polished wood between us. They were massive, intricate, highly detailed designs detailing a $25 million sustainable cliffside estate for a Silicon Valley tech billionaire. They were designs I drew with my own 2 hands. I was the one who spent late nights calculating the complex load-bearing requirements, factoring in the unpredictable seismic activity of the region, and ensuring every single strict structural code was met to the letter. Yet, I wasn't credited for a single line on that paper. Tristan's name was proudly stamped in bold ink on the cover sheet as the visionary behind the project. In that exact second, staring at my stolen work, something inside me finally snapped. Or perhaps more accurately, it finally healed. I realized my loyalty had officially expired. The invisible, heavy chain that had bound me to this toxic family, the desperate, pathetic hope that one day my hard work would earn their genuine respect, dissolved into thin air. I looked at my father. He sat at the head of the table, his broad shoulders squared, radiating the kind of positional authority he had wielded like a weapon over me since I was a child. I looked at Tristan, still wearing that disgusting, triumphant smirk, and then I simply said, "All right." The silence that followed those 2 words was completely terrifying. It was terrifying because for the very first time in my entire life, they weren't looking at an obedient, desperate son. They were looking at an architect planning a massive, calculated demolition. My father's smug smile was permanently etched into his aging face. Fully convinced he had just put his rebellious dog back in its place, he wanted me to sit at home in my apartment for 2 weeks and think about my insolence. He wanted me to experience the sheer anxiety of a paused salary. He wanted me to come back, begging, utterly grateful for the meager paycheck he allowed me to have, ready to kiss his ring. He wanted to break my spirit so completely that I would never dare question Tristan's reckless, idiotic decisions again. He had absolutely no idea that he had just handed me the one thing I had been waiting years for. He gave me the perfect exit strategy. He didn't know that the very next morning that arrogant smirk on Tristan's face would curdle into pure, unadulterated panic when he walked in with his morning espresso to find my office completely empty. He didn't know that there would be nothing left behind, but a single legally binding resignation letter resting dead center on my glass desk. And he certainly didn't know that when Marcus, the company lawyer, would run into this very room, his face pale as a sheet, gasping, my father's victorious smile would die on the spot. But to truly understand the sheer weight of that silence in the boardroom, to understand why I was more than willing to burn my own family's bridge to the ground without a second thought, you have to understand the decades of quiet humiliation that laid the thick foundation for it. You have to understand the toxic soil in which this family tree was planted. Growing up in our household meant learning early on that love was never unconditional. Love was a highly regulated commodity, a currency traded strictly for compliance, obedience, and optical perfection. If you were the golden child like my older brother Tristan, the bank of parental affection was always open, operating with an unlimited line of credit. Tristan was loud, charismatic, and completely allergic to actual hard work. He was the kind of person who could walk into a room, shake a few hands, flash $1 million smile, and somehow take credit for the building he was standing in. I remember the Thanksgiving dinners of our childhood. They felt more like corporate shareholder meetings than family gatherings. We would sit around a massive oak table, extended family gathered from across the state, passing plates of expensive catered food. My father, Richard, would stand up, clink his crystal glass, and boast loudly about Tristan's golf handicap, his shiny new sports car, or the promotion he was supposedly about to get. He would conveniently leave out the fact that Tristan's college fund had to be replenished 3 separate times after he failed out of various prestigious business programs because he was too busy partying. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, Richard would offer a tight, polite smile and say, "Elias is doing fine in the back office. He's a good mechanic for our little engines. Someone has to do the dirty work, right?" That was exactly how they saw me. I wasn't an innovator. I wasn't a leader. I was just the mechanic they kept locked in the basement to fix the engines they kept breaking with their sheer incompetence. My mother, Eleanor, was the master architect of this twisted, deeply sick dynamic. She had this soft, gentle voice that she used to deliver the most manipulative psychological commands imaginable. Whenever Tristan would take credit for my science fair projects in middle school, or later my architectural drafts at the firm, Eleanor would pull me aside into a quiet hallway. She would pat my cheek, look at me with wide, pleading eyes, and say, "Elias, you know your brother needs this win. He struggles with his confidence. You're so smart. You can always make another design. Don't be selfish and tear this family apart. We need to protect your father's legacy." When you hear that narrative constantly, year after year, decade after decade, you internalize it. You internalize the toxic idea that if you just work harder, if you just produce more undeniable value, if you just keep your head down and swallow your pride, eventually the ledger will balance. You believe that one day they will look at you, see your worth, and finally give you the respect you deserve. That is the trap. It is a prison built entirely of hope. You learn a very specific survival set. You learn that speaking up gets you cut off, yelled at, and isolated, but staying quiet keeps you in the room. You learn to make yourself so incredibly essential that they literally cannot afford to discard you. I thought I was earning my place in the family business, but really I was just increasing their profit margins while eroding my own soul. For 8 grueling years, my office at the firm had been my only real sanctuary. It was a beautiful, expansive space with floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked the sprawling Seattle skyline. It was a view I had earned, not by blood or nepotism, but by thousands of agonizing billable hours and turning structural impossibilities into concrete reality. The walls of my office held my degrees, framed in simple black wood, hanging right alongside the major architectural awards the development division had won under my direct leadership. I had built something tangible here, not just buildings, but a standard of excellence, a level of meticulous quality that our firm had never once achieved before I walked through those doors. And the absolute crown jewel of all my work was sitting right there on my desk, catching the morning light, the Terralock modular system. It was a highly sustainable load-bearing system that I invented from scratch. It was nothing short of brilliant. The system cut overall construction time by 40% and increased a building's seismic resilience and thermal efficiency by half. It was a massive game changer for luxury real estate in the Pacific Northwest. My father loved Terralock because it saved him millions in raw materials and labor costs. Tristan loved it because, as the vice president of client relations, he could slap his name on the glossy brochures and sell it to wealthy clients as top-tier green tech luxury. But I loved it because I built it from nothing. I remember the agonizing nights I spent designing the joints, the weekends I sacrificed refining the complex geometry while my friends were out living their lives. The sheer physical exhaustion of proving it worked when veteran engineers in the industry laughed and said it wouldn't hold. My silence over the last 8 years wasn't mere submission. It was deliberate, Cold-blooded data collection. I wasn't just enduring their daily abuse and taking the salary they threw at me. I was thoroughly documenting the infrastructure of the entire company. I was learning exactly where the load-bearing walls of their business were located. I was memorizing the codes to the metaphorical safe. And most importantly, I was quietly patenting the TerraLock technology entirely in my own name under a separate legal entity called Elias Architectural LLC. I did this because deep down in my gut, I knew a day would inevitably come when my family would try to erase me completely. I knew they would try to push me out the moment I became too expensive or too vocal. I needed to be absolutely sure that when I finally walked out the door, I didn't just leave an empty chair. I needed to ensure that I took the very foundation of the company with me. The breaking point, the moment the timeline accelerated, arrived with a hurricane of pure, unadulterated arrogance. It all started 3 days before that fateful boardroom meeting when Tristan managed to close a massive deal with Arthur Vance, a highly influential tech mogul. Mr. Vance wanted a futuristic, sustainable estate built right on a prime piece of cliffside property overlooking the Puget Sound. It was a $25 million project. The commission alone on a deal that size was staggering. It would easily cover Tristan's lavish lifestyle, his country club memberships, and his impending divorce settlement for an entire year. But to secure the deal, to outbid our aggressive competitors who were circling like sharks, Tristan made a promise. A fatal, incredibly stupid promise. He looked a billionaire straight in the face and promised him the custom mansion would be completely move-in ready in 90 days. 90 days. Any freshman architecture student could tell you that was a physical impossibility. The foundational curing time for concrete in that specific climate zone was 28 days alone. The custom glazing required for the massive structural windows had a rigid 4-week lead time from the manufacturer in Germany. Securing the necessary seismic zoning approvals and city permits for a structure that close to a cliff edge would take at least 2 solid months. Tristan had sold an absolute fantasy to a billionaire who had a legal team vicious enough to destroy our entire company if we failed to deliver. When I saw the signed contract land on my desk, my blood ran cold. The timeline stipulated in the addendum was nothing short of corporate suicide. I didn't panic, though. I sat down, turned on my dual monitors, and did exactly what a professional project director does. I ran a rigorous, highly detailed critical path analysis. I looked at the soil composition reports, the global supply chain logistics, the HOA meeting schedules, and the labor union holiday blocks. I drafted a revised, highly comprehensive Gantt chart showing a realistic yet still incredibly aggressive timeline of 10 full months. I drafted a carefully worded email. I attached the revised schedule and sent it directly to Mr. Vance, making sure to copy my father and Tristan. I included a simple, highly professional note explaining that in order to ensure absolute structural integrity and strict code compliance, this was the required expedited schedule. It was completely factual. It was devoid of emotion. Most importantly, it was absolutely necessary to prevent a massive breach of contract lawsuit that would have bankrupted our entire firm. 10 minutes later, the illusion of family peace shattered into a million pieces. My office door flew open with such force it slammed against the wall stopper, leaving a dent in the drywall. Tristan stormed in, his face flushed a deep, ugly red. He was shaking with rage, screaming at the top of his lungs that I was deliberately trying to sabotage his career and ruin his reputation with high net worth clients. He didn't care about the laws of physics. He didn't care about the curing time of concrete or the brutal logistics of international supply chains. He only cared about the massive commission check that was now in jeopardy. He slammed both of his hands down on my desk, leaning over me, his designer silk tie dangling over my keyboard. "You always do this, Elias. You always try to make me look stupid. It's a house. Just build the damn house. Just pour the foundation and put up the walls." Before I could even respond to his absolute lack of industry knowledge, my father walked in right behind him. I looked at Richard, expecting the seasoned CEO of a major real estate firm to understand the severe legal liability we were facing. I expected him to look at the numbers, recognize the disaster Tristan had orchestrated, and back me up for the sake of the business. Instead, Richard crossed his arms, his face a mask of cold fury, and sided completely with his golden child. He looked down at me as if I were a stain on his expensive rug. He told me that sales and growth rely on vision, on pushing boundaries, and that my constant, miserable negativity was suffocating the company's potential. That was the exact moment I realized the horrible truth. They would gladly let the roof cave in on a family of 4 just to protect Tristan's fragile ego. Right in the middle of Richard's tirade, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message from my mother, Eleanor. It read, "Elias, please stop embarrassing your brother in front of the staff. Fix the math for the client. We are family. Don't ruin this for us. Your father's blood pressure is high enough. Fix the math." As if I could negotiate a compromise with gravity. As if I could bribe the structural load of a steel beam to hold more weight just because my last name was identical to theirs. Then came the final verdict. Richard stood tall, puffing out his chest, using his physical size to try and intimidate me. He pointed a thick finger at my face and declared I was officially suspended. 2 weeks, no pay. My egregious crime, undermining the authority of the Vice President of Client Relations. I realized then that there is a tipping point in every survivor's life. A singular moment when you realize the immense debt of love and loyalty you've been trying to pay off will never actually be settled because the other side just keeps moving the decimal point. That realization doesn't break you, it clarifies you. It turns your vision crystal clear, stripping away all the emotional fog. All right, I said quietly, my voice eerily calm. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my timeline. I just accepted it. Richard looked almost disappointed, his brow furrowing because I didn't grovel at his feet. He wanted a fight so he could crush me, but I gave him nothing. He turned on his heel and walked out, Tristan trailing right behind him like a victorious prince who had just won a war he didn't even fight. I sat alone in the quiet of my office. I reached for my computer mouse to save my complex architectural files and upload them to my secure personal drive. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The CAD software vanished in a blink. A harsh gray box popped up right in the center of the monitor. Access denied. Your credentials have been revoked by administrator. Richard had locked me out of the company servers before he even made it back down the hallway to his own corner office. He thought he was asserting his absolute dominance. He thought he was cutting off my access to punish me, to remind me who held the keys to the kingdom. He had absolutely no clue that he was locking himself inside a burning building. The war had officially started, and they didn't even know I had the nuclear codes in my pocket. I stood up from my desk, walked over to the deep supply closet in the corner, pulled out a large, heavy-duty cardboard box, and began to pack. I moved with surgical, completely emotionless precision. The framed degrees came down off the walls first, then the shiny architectural awards. I wrapped them in bubble wrap with the cold, calculated efficiency of an archivist, preserving critical evidence for a massive trial. Every item I placed in that box was a piece of my identity that I was actively reclaiming from them. A few minutes later, there was a timid knock at the door. My assistant, Maya, poked her head in. She was a brilliant, dedicated young woman who actually understood the immense pressure I was under every single day. The rumor mill in a corporate real estate firm moves significantly faster than fiber optics, and she had clearly heard the vicious shouting. She hovered anxiously in the doorway, clutching a yellow legal pad to her chest like a shield. She asked if I was okay. She asked, her voice trembling slightly, if I was really leaving for 2 whole weeks. I stopped packing for a second. I looked at her, offering a small, reassuring smile. I told her to pack up her things and take the rest of the day off. I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't tell her I wasn't coming back in 2 weeks. I didn't tell her I wasn't coming back ever. Once she left, I turned back to my desk. I reached out and gently picked up the heavy metal prototype of the Terralock system. As I placed it into the cardboard box, my hand paused for a fraction of a second. This piece of steel was the structural core of every single luxury home we were currently building. It was the literal backbone of my father's current wealth. I wrapped it carefully and set it at the very bottom of the box. I was taping the last box shut when I felt a dark presence in the doorway. It was Tristan. The overwhelming, cloying scent of his designer cologne filled the room. He walked in casually, acting like he owned the entire building. He looked down at my neatly taped boxes and smirked, a look of pure, unadulterated condescension. He leaned his shoulder against the glass wall, crossing his arms, and told me that maybe this time off would actually be good for my mental health. Then he did something incredibly, astonishingly foolish. He reached over to my desk and picked up the massive set of blueprints for the tech mogul's $25 million estate. The ones I had painstakingly drawn. The ones he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He held them up in the air like a hard-won trophy. He proudly announced, puffing his chest out, that he was going to personally take over the project management himself. He laughed, a short barking sound, and said it couldn't possibly be that hard to tell a bunch of dirty contractors what to do. I stopped. I stared at him. For one brief, fleeting second, the dutiful brother in me almost warned him. I almost told him that the specific soil composition on that cliffside property required a highly specialized pile driving depth, and if he messed it up, the entire massive structure would literally slide into the freezing water of the Puget Sound. I almost told him that our primary steel suppliers required a massive 40% cash deposit by this coming Friday or we would lose our production slot, delaying the entire project by 6 months and triggering a catastrophic penalty clause. But I didn't say a single word. I just looked at him standing there looking so incredibly arrogant while holding my complex architectural plans completely upside down. I picked up my heavy cardboard box. I walked past him without breaking eye contact, leaving him standing alone in the quiet office. That night, sitting in the dim light of my downtown apartment, I didn't sleep. I poured a cup of black coffee, opened my personal laptop, and pulled up my employment contract. I meticulously reviewed every single page, specifically focusing on Clause 19, subsection C regarding constructive dismissal, and Clause 24 regarding intellectual property licensing. I sent a highly secure email to my outside legal counsel to confirm my strategy. The trap was perfectly set. The severance math was calculated down to the penny. Update 1. The next morning, I woke up long before my alarm clock even had a chance to go off. I didn't feel the usual heavy, suffocating knot of dread in my stomach. Instead, my mind was incredibly sharp, crystal clear, and completely focused. I walked into my bedroom closet and bypassed the standard everyday suits I usually wore. I reached to the very back and pulled out a bespoke navy blue suit. It was a suit I had bought years ago with my very first major project bonus, but rarely wore because Richard always made subtle passive-aggressive comments if I looked sharper than his golden child. Today, I didn't care about their fragile egos. I tied a dark silk tie, adjusted my heavy silver cufflinks, and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I didn't look like the quiet, submissive project director they were so used to kicking around. I looked like a man who was about to foreclose on their entire fabricated reality. I drove to the office at exactly 9 a.m. sharp. I didn't take my usual designated spot in the subterranean employee parking garage. I drove right up to the front of the massive glass building and parked my car squarely in the prime visitor section. The morning air was crisp and biting. I walked through the heavy glass revolving doors carrying absolutely nothing but a thin black leather portfolio. Inside it were the exact legal documents that were going to change my life forever. The main lobby was bustling with the usual morning rush. The senior receptionist, Helen, looked up from her switchboard. Her warm, welcoming smile immediately faltered, replaced by a look of deep, uncomfortable confusion. She knew I had been officially suspended. Elias? Helen asked, her voice hushed and nervous. Are you supposed to be here today? Your father sent down a memo. He said your access was revoked. I just have a quick meeting, Helen, I said gently, offering her a warm, reassuring smile. It won't take long. You don't need to page them. I walked straight down the long, plushly carpeted hallway toward the main executive boardroom. Through the expensive frosted glass walls, I could clearly see the blurry moving outlines of the people sitting inside. I didn't hesitate. I reached out, grabbed the heavy brass handle, and pushed the thick oak door open without knocking. The room was already in full session. Richard was sitting comfortably at the head of the massive mahogany table, sipping casually from a delicate porcelain coffee cup. Tristan was lounging in the expensive ergonomic chair right next to him, scrolling mindlessly through his phone. Sitting at the far end of the long table was Marcus, our senior corporate counsel. Marcus was a meticulous, weary-looking lawyer in his late 50s who always looked like he needed a vacation. He was a genuinely good man, extremely observant, and most importantly, the only person in this entire building besides me who actually took the time to read the fine print of our massive contracts. When the heavy door clicked shut behind me, the sound echoed loudly in the quiet space, and all three heads snapped up simultaneously. Richard set his coffee cup down on its saucer with a sharp, aggressive clink. What in the world are you doing here, Elias? Richard demanded, his booming voice echoing off the glass walls. I made myself extremely clear yesterday afternoon. You are officially suspended. You are not allowed on these premises. Yeah. Tristan let out a loud, obnoxious snort. Did you come crawling back to apologize already? Because if you did, you need to make it quick. We have a massive strategy meeting for the new Cliffside estate in 10 minutes, and some of us actually have real important work to do. I didn't react to the bait. I walked slowly and deliberately toward the center of the table. I stood tall, placing my black leather portfolio gently onto the polished glass surface of the table. The soft thud commanded the entire room's attention. I am not here to apologize to anyone, Richard, I said. My voice was perfectly level. I am here to formally resign. Richard's eyes narrowed dangerously. Tristan finally put his phone face down on the table, a confused, ugly frown wrinkling his forehead. I reached down, unzipped the leather portfolio, pulled out a single sheet of premium watermarked legal paper, and slid it smoothly across the long table. But I didn't slide it toward Richard or Tristan. I slid it all the way down to Marcus the lawyer. Effective immediately, as of 9/5 this morning, I am formally terminating my employment with this firm, I announced, keeping my eyes completely locked on Marcus's face. Furthermore, per Clause 19, subsection C of my signed executive employment agreement, I am officially triggering the constructive dismissal provision. For a split second, the room was dead, suffocatingly silent, and then Richard threw his head back and laughed loudly. It was a harsh, barking, theatrical laugh. Constructive dismissal. Mad. Richard sneered, shaking his head and looking at Tristan as if sharing a joke. Are you completely delusional, Elias? You weren't fired. You were suspended for gross insubordination. You don't just get to quit your job and claim constructive dismissal because your fragile feelings are hurt. You don't get a magical golden parachute just because you're throwing a tantrum. I ignored Richard completely. I kept my gaze fixed entirely on Marcus, who was now staring down at the formal letter, his hands trembling slightly as he picked it up to read the text. Marcus, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through Richard's lingering laughter like a sharp knife. Please remind the CEO of the strict legal definition outlined in my specific employment contract. I personally drafted that exact clause 5 years ago, back when Richard was going through his extremely messy second divorce and the company's financial stability was wildly unpredictable. Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't look up at Richard. He kept his eyes glued to the paper. Under the explicit terms of the contract, I continued, reciting the exact legal words I had memorized perfectly the night before, locking a senior project director out of the main company server, completely removing their access to active architectural blueprints, and publicly demoting them in front of staff without a formal performance review or written warning constitutes a material breach of contract. By revoking my digital credentials yesterday while I was still physically inside the building, Richard legally dismissed me without cause. Richard stopped laughing instantly. His face rapidly shifted from an arrogant, dismissive, pale to a mottled, highly dangerous shade of red. He slammed his large, heavy hand down on the mahogany table, violently rattling the coffee cups and saucers. "You are completely out of your mind," Richard shouted, the veins popping in his thick neck. "I won't pay you a single dime. I will tie you up in civil court for the next decade. I will bury you in so many legal fees until you are literally begging for a minimum wage job." "The standard penalty for constructive dismissal," I said smoothly, talking right over his aggressive screaming, maintaining perfect eye contact with the lawyer, "is an immediate, non-negotiable buyout of my accumulated equity stake in the firm." I had an independent auditor run the exact math based on our last official quarterly valuation. The company currently owes me exactly $1,250,000. And per the contract which you personally signed and notarized, Richard, it is payable in full within 30 days. Tristan jumped up abruptly out of his expensive chair. His face contorted in sheer, unadulterated rage. "You greedy, pathetic loser. You're trying to bankrupt your own family. You're just jealous because I actually closed the big deal with the tech mogul and you didn't." I looked slowly over at my brother. For the very first time in 34 long years, I didn't feel the familiar crushing sting of inadequacy. I just felt an overwhelming, profound sense of deep pity. He was fighting so desperately for a tin crown in a crumbling, dying kingdom. "You can have the deal, Tristan," I said softly. "You can have the vice president title. You can have the massive corner office with the beautiful view of the water. You can have all the public credit you so desperately crave. Note, but you absolutely cannot have my equity. It belongs to me." Richard stood up now, looming aggressively over the table. "Get out of my building," he snarled, pointing a shaking, angry finger directly at the door. "If you want a war, Elias, you've got one. Get out." I smiled. It wasn't a nice, friendly smile. It was a cold, completely hollow expression. It was the smile of a man who has meticulously wired the dynamite to the foundation and is simply standing back calmly watching the fuse burn down to the final millimeter. "The money is just the beginning, Richard," I said, my voice dropping to a low whisper that somehow commanded total silence in the large room. "There is one more thing we need to discuss before I leave. One more crucial clause in that contract that you obviously didn't bother to read." The entire atmosphere in the boardroom shifted dramatically, almost violently. The aggressive screaming energy that Richard and Tristan had been throwing at me suddenly hit a massive invisible wall. For the first time in my entire life, a flicker of genuine deep-seated doubt crossed my father's arrogant face. He slowly lowered his pointing finger. I turned my attention back to the far end of the table where the company lawyer was still staring at my resignation letter. "Marcus," I said calmly, my voice steady and measured, "please turn to page 14 of the employment addendum I provided in that packet. The specific detailed section regarding intellectual property and corporate licensing." Marcus, who was already sweating profusely, frantically flipped through the thick stack of legal papers securely attached to my resignation letter. The sound of the rustling paper was incredibly, deafeningly loud in the suddenly quiet room. I watched his tired eyes scan the dense, complicated legal text. I watched as his pupils visibly dilated in real time. I watched as the blood completely drained from his face, leaving him looking exactly like a man who had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Marcus looked up slowly at Richard. His lower lip was literally trembling. "Richard," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking painfully. He's right. The Terralock modular system, the core patent for the technology. It isn't legally held by the firm." Tristan scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes dramatically and crossing his arms. "What in the world are you talking about, Marcus? Of course it is. We sell it every single day. It is plastered in all our marketing brochures. Stop being ridiculous." "The patent," Marcus said, completely ignoring Tristan and staring in pure horror at Richard, "is legally registered to and completely held by an independent separate entity. Elias Architectural LLC. Marcus wiped his sweating forehead with a trembling hand. "The company doesn't own the technology. We never did." Richard's jaw physically dropped. He looked like he had been struck hard across the face. He turned to me, his eyes wide with a chaotic mix of betrayal, rage, and sheer disbelief. "So what?" Richard spat, spit actually flying from his lips, desperately trying to cling to his rapidly crumbling authority. "You work for me. I pay your salary. Everything you design under this roof belongs to the company. It's called intellectual property, you idiot, and we own it. Not according to the explicit, legally binding terms of the addendum we executed 5 years ago," I replied, my voice cool, steady, and utterly victorious. Clause 24 states very clearly that the firm only holds a revocable license to utilize the Terralock intellectual property, and that license is strictly and entirely contingent upon my continued active employment as the senior project director of this firm. I leaned forward slowly, placing both of my hands flat on the cold mahogany table, bringing myself closer to Richard. I wanted him to hear every single syllable clearly. In the event of termination without cause, or in this specific legal case, constructive dismissal, I said, pausing for deliberate effect, watching his eyes widen, the license to use that technology is automatically revoked. Effective immediately as of 9/5 this morning. I let those words hang heavily in the air. I let the absolute crushing gravity of the situation completely suck the oxygen out of the room. "Do you understand what that means, Richard?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, yet echoing loudly in their ears. "That means you legally cannot pour the foundation for Mr. Vance's $25 million cliffside estate today. You cannot finish the 3 massive luxury estates currently sitting half-built in Bellevue. You cannot order the custom steel from our suppliers. You cannot even distribute the glossy marketing materials that Tristan handed out yesterday because they feature my patented, highly protected designs." Tristan looked frantically back and forth between me and Marcus, sheer panic finally breaking through his arrogant, unearned facade. "Wait, what is he saying, Marcus? What does that mean for my contract? What does that mean for my commission? I need that money for my upcoming divorce settlement. You can't do this. If you use my technology," I continued, completely ignoring my brother's pathetic whining, staring directly into my father's terrified eyes, "I will immediately sue you for massive patent infringement in federal court. And with Marcus sitting right here as my witness to this conversation, I will win. I will take every single asset this company possesses. You are currently sitting on a massive pile of signed contracts you absolutely cannot legally fulfill, selling a premium product you no longer own." The silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a total vacuum. It was the horrifying sound of a multi-million-dollar empire collapsing in real time, brick by brick. I watched the last remnants of color drain completely from Richard's aging face. The powerful, domineering CEO who had controlled my life through deep fear and financial manipulation was suddenly gone, replaced by a terrified old man facing total, irreversible financial ruin. He looked slowly over at Tristan, his beloved golden child, desperately hoping his vice president of client relations would somehow have a miraculous visionary solution to save them. But Tristan was utterly useless. He was just staring at me, his mouth hanging slightly open, looking exactly like a spoiled child who had just shattered a priceless vase he couldn't possibly afford to replace. He had no vision. He had no technical knowledge. He had absolutely nothing to offer when the real work was required. "I will be expecting the buyout check for $1,250,000 wired directly to my account within 30 days, I said smoothly, picking up my leather portfolio and zipping it closed with a sharp final sound. I turned away from the table and began walking toward the heavy glass door. I stopped just before I grabbed the brass handle and looked back over my shoulder at the terrified company lawyer. "And Marcus," I advised, my tone dripping with cold professional courtesy, "I highly recommend you start drafting the formal cease and desist letters to all our active contractors immediately. You really don't want Richard to be held personally liable for unauthorized illegal construction on top of a massive breach of contract lawsuit. It would completely wipe out whatever is left of his retirement." I walked out of the boardroom. I didn't storm out. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the heavy oak door behind me to make a dramatic point. I closed it gently with a soft, definitive click that sounded exactly like the final tumblers of a heavy bank vault lock falling perfectly into place, sealing them inside their own disaster. Update 2. 3 months later, my life looked entirely, beautifully different. The suffocating, toxic silence of that corporate boardroom had been replaced by a new, wonderful kind of silence. The silence in my brand new, fully independent architectural studio was broken only by the soft, rhythmic scratch of my drafting pencil against high-quality paper. I had signed a long-term lease on a beautiful, expansive converted loft space in Pioneer Square. It had gorgeous exposed brick walls, incredibly high industrial ceilings, and massive windows that flooded the entire workspace with bright natural light. Best of all, the air inside was completely free of toxic family politics, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation. I had used a sizable portion of my equity buyout money to completely set up shop. Marcus, absolutely terrified of the severe legal repercussions I had clearly outlined during that meeting, had personally ensured the funds were wired directly to my bank account exactly 29 days after my dramatic resignation. I wasn't just surviving on my own. For the first time in my entire life, I was absolutely thriving. I was taking meetings with clients who actually respected my input, who valued my engineering background, and who paid their invoices on time. But across town, in the sterile corporate offices of my family's firm, the mighty empire I had left behind was actively burning to the ground. The total collapse of the company wasn't a quick, spectacular explosion. It was a slow, agonizing, profoundly humiliating grind that played out over several brutal weeks. It started exactly where I knew it would, with the immediate, legally binding cease and desist orders I had my new legal counsel enforce on all their job sites. Mr. Vance, the powerful tech mogul, was absolutely furious when he was officially informed that construction on his dream cliffside home had been abruptly halted before the first steel beam was even raised. When Richard couldn't provide a valid, acceptable legal reason for the massive delay, Vance didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately sued the firm for a massive breach of contract. That highly publicized, aggressive lawsuit instantly triggered a catastrophic penalty clause in the company's corporate insurance policy, raising their monthly liability premiums by a staggering 200%. Then came the absolute logistical nightmare. With their backs against the wall and the bank calling daily, Tristan desperately tried to step up. In a blind panic, hoping to save his shrinking salary and his reputation, he went behind Richard's back and quietly hired a junior architect named Leo. Leo was a kid fresh out of grad school, highly ambitious, but incredibly naive to the realities of complex structural engineering. Tristan offered him a massive cash bonus to secretly tweak my Terralock designs just enough to theoretically bypass my strict patent protections. But there is a fundamental undeniable truth in this world. You can manipulate people, you can manipulate emotions, and you can manipulate a family narrative, but you absolutely cannot manipulate physics. Without the precise patented geometric core of my modular system, the complex load-bearing calculations simply didn't work. Leo spent 3 agonizing weeks running computer simulations, pulling his hair out, only to realize the structural integrity was fatally compromised. The junior architect finally had to sit Tristan down in a tense meeting and explain that they needed to completely abandon the sustainable marketing pitch and switch back to traditional heavy steel I-beams. This sudden drastic pivot would immediately double the raw material cost of the project and triple the overall construction timeline. When Leo delivered the bad news, Tristan absolutely lost his mind. He screamed at the poor kid. He threw coffee mugs against the wall. He demanded that Leo just make it work, completely ignoring the laws of gravity. Tristan genuinely believed that possessing a fancy title meant you could simply command results into existence. He didn't understand the fundamental illusion of power via the empty chair. For years, Tristan had sat comfortably in executive meetings, nodded charmingly at wealthy clients, and confidently signed his name to incredibly complex documents he didn't understand, firmly believing that this performance was the actual work. What I had always possessed, what I had spent thousands of hours building, was competence, authority, power derived from intimately knowing exactly how the machine works from the inside out. I heard all the juicy, devastating details through the industry grapevine. Desperate contractors, men who had known me for years and trusted my blueprints, called me directly, begging for any freelance work because Richard was aggressively bleeding cash. He was paying astronomical daily delay penalties on 3 different stalled construction sites across the city, dealing with furious HOA boards. He had fired Leo in a massive fit of rage. Worse, credible rumors were swirling that Richard was quietly taking closed-door meetings with high-profile bankruptcy lawyers just to figure out how to shield his personal real estate portfolio and his retirement accounts from the impending implosion. The family name, once completely synonymous with luxury and architectural innovation in Seattle, was now a massive, glaring warning label for stalled projects, unpaid invoices, and endless litigation. I was at my desk working on a beautiful commission for a local community center when my cell phone buzzed loudly on the wooden desk. The caller ID flashed brightly on the screen. Richard. It was the 5th time he had called me this week. I didn't answer. I just watched the screen glow, letting it ring out into the quiet room. I was deliberately letting him sit in the agonizing, suffocating silence that he had personally created. I was letting him feel the crushing, undeniable weight of the empty chair. He finally showed up in person on a dreary Tuesday morning. It was raining, a cold, gray, miserable Seattle drizzle that heavily streaked the large glass windows of my Pioneer Square studio, casting long shadows across the floor. I was at my desk when I saw his car pull up to the curb. It wasn't the flagship chauffeur-driven Mercedes S-Class he used to pride himself on. It was a modest, slightly older midsize sedan. He stepped out into the freezing rain without an umbrella and walked slowly toward the front door. His steps were slow and incredibly heavy. He looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him screaming in that boardroom. The rigid, overbearing arrogance that used to hold his spine perfectly straight had completely evaporated, leaving behind a hollowed-out, exhausted man who looked like he was wearing a suit 2 sizes too big for his rapidly shrinking frame. I pressed the intercom buzzer to unlock the front door. I didn't get up to greet him. I didn't offer to take his wet, dripping coat. I simply sat behind my drafting desk, my hands calmly folded on top of a fresh, clean set of blueprints. Richard stood dripping in the middle of the room, looking around at the space I had built without him. He took in the exposed brick, the modern warm lighting, the quiet, steady hum of an independent business that was fully solvent and completely at peace. Tristan is out, Richard said. No preamble, no fake pleasantries. I fired him this morning, Richard continued, his voice raspy and devoid of emotion. He's packing his bags right now. He's moving to Arizona to stay with your mother's sister. The divorce wiped him out completely. I nodded slowly, my expression completely neutral, offering no sympathy. That seems prudent, I replied softly. The tech mogul settled out of court, Richard stated, staring at the floorboards, unable to meet my eyes. It cost the company $4 million in immediate penalties. We had to drastically liquidate assets. We sold the family lake house just to cover the immediate liquidity gap and keep the lights on. He paused, clearly waiting for me to wince. He was waiting for me to show some sign of familial grief over the loss of our childhood vacation home, the place where we spent our summers. I didn't give him an inch. I just kept looking at him, my face a mask of polite indifference. We absolutely cannot finish the Bellevue luxury estates without the Terra Lock license, Richard admitted, the defeat heavy and obvious in his chest. The prime contractors are threatening to walk off the job by Friday and sue us for lost wages. The bank is calling my personal cell phone daily. We are drowning, Elias, the whole thing is going under. He took a slow, hesitant step closer to my desk, leaning his trembling hands on the back of the guest chair, but he didn't dare sit down. He looked broken. I'm here to make you an official offer, Elias, Richard said, finally looking up, a desperate final plea in his tired eyes. Come back. Not as the project director. Not as an employee. As the CEO, I will step down to chairman immediately. You take full uncontested operational control of the entire firm. You get 51% of the voting stock. It's yours. The whole kingdom, everything I built. I sat completely still. This was it. This was the exact offer I had spent my entire 20s desperately dreaming of. This was the ultimate validation I had scraped, clawed, and sacrificed my mental health for. My powerful, overbearing father was literally handing me the keys to the entire empire, publicly admitting that I was the only person capable of ruling it. He was trying to sell me my own rightful inheritance, acknowledging that I was the superior son. And the catch? I asked, my voice flat, completely devoid of any excitement or triumph. You relicense the intellectual property back to the company, Richard said eagerly, sensing an opening, his voice rising with a desperate hope. We finish the stalled projects. We use your brilliance to rebuild the reputation. The legacy, Elias, it belongs to you. We can fix this together. I looked at him. I really, truly looked at him. And for the very first time in my life, I didn't see a terrifying titan of industry. I didn't see the invincible patriarch who controlled my destiny. I saw a beggar king standing ankle deep in the smoking ruins of a castle he had set on fire with his own two hands, desperately trying to trade a worthless crown of ashes for a fire extinguisher. No, I said simply. Richard blinked, momentarily stunned, as if I had spoken a foreign language. Excuse me? The answer is no, Richard. I don't want the job. I don't want the stock. And I certainly do not want the legacy. You're being incredibly stubborn. He snapped, a sudden, desperate flash of the old, angry Richard breaking through the pathetic facade. I'm offering you absolutely everything you ever wanted. I'm standing here admitting you were right. Tristan couldn't handle it. I was wrong. You won, Elias. Take the win. I didn't win, I corrected him softly, leaning forward, resting my forearms on the desk. I escaped. There is a massive difference. I stood up and walked over to the large window, looking out at the bustling city street below. You think you're generously offering me an empire, Richard, but you're actually offering me a toxic Superfund site. The company is completely poisoned. The brand is fatally damaged in the industry, and the internal culture is rotting from the inside out. If I came back, I wouldn't be building anything beautiful. I would be spending the next 10 years of my life miserably cleaning up your mess. I turned back to face him, crossing my arms. But that's not even the real reason I'm saying no. The real reason is that I finally understand the actual cost of that legacy. This was the absolute moment of final severance. I looked him dead in the eye and delivered the harsh, undeniable truth I had been carrying heavily in my chest since the day I packed my cardboard box. There is a persistent, dangerous myth we tell ourselves about family, I said quietly. We tell ourselves that blood is a binding sacred contract, that we owe our parents our infinite survival and loyalty because they gave us life. But that is a lie. You didn't raise me, Richard. You managed me. You treated my affection and my talent like a renewable resource you could exploit for maximum profit. You constantly demanded absolute loyalty, but you only ever offered conditional employment. I am your father, he whispered, the words sounding hollow, pathetic, and completely meaningless in the open space of my studio. And I am a distinct legal entity, I replied, my voice hard as steel. Cutting the bloodline today isn't an act of malice. It is an act of pure self-preservation. It is the only way to save my actual self from being cannibalized by your system. If I accept your offer and come back, I am forced to accept the premise that my core worth is forever tied to your approval. I reject that premise entirely. I am not saving your name. I am saving Elias. He stared at me for a very long time. The silence stretched between us, heavy and incredibly final. He realized in that exact moment that he possessed absolutely zero leverage. He couldn't fire me. He couldn't legally disown me of what I had already built. He couldn't even guilt-trip me because I had perfectly balanced the emotional ledger and permanently closed the account. What will you do? He asked finally, his voice barely a whisper. With the patents, I'll license them, I said with a faint, genuine smile. To other architecture firms, to our competitors, to builders who actually pay their invoices on time and respect their engineers. As a matter of fact, I'm meeting with Mr. Vance next week to discuss finishing his home myself. The Terralock modular system will eventually build thousands of beautiful homes, Richard, just not yours. He nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't even say goodbye. He simply turned around and walked out of the studio into the freezing rain. His shoulders were severely slumped. He was a broken man walking blindly into a future he hadn't ever planned for. I watched him go through the glass. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel overly triumphant. I just felt clear. I turned back to my drafting desk. The blueprints for the community center were waiting for me. It was a project that would genuinely serve a community, built on a solid foundation that I had poured myself. I picked up my pencil. The line was perfectly straight. The structure was undeniably sound. And for the very first time in my entire life, the design was entirely, undeniably mine. At my engagement party, my sister announced her pregnancy and joked about stealing the spotlight. Everyone, including my parents, ignored me. My sister announced her pregnancy at my engagement party, smirked and remarked, "Sorry, guess I stole the spotlight again, like I always do." Mom exclaimed eagerly, "Finally, some really exciting news worth celebrating." Dadi concurs. Babies are so much more important than simple engagements. Everyone laughed and congratulated her, except me and my fiancé. So the next day, we sent out a totally different save the date, announcing our elopement in Las Vegas that weekend. When she realized what it read, she called me and screamed. My name is Emma, and I am 29 years old. I've been with my fiancé, Ethan Miller, for 4 years, and he proposed to me 3 months ago in the most romantic way possible. We were trekking on our favorite trail, where we had our first date, when he dropped down on one knee near where we first kissed. It was wonderful, intimate, and everything I'd ever hoped for. I shed joyous tears for around 20 minutes straight. Now let me tell you about my sister, Jenna Bennett. She is 25 years old and has always been the golden child in our lives. I wish I were exaggerating, but I am not. Jenna Bennett achieved straight A's while I suffered from dyslexia. Jenna Bennett did varsity cheerleading, while I warmed the bench on JV. Jenna Bennett was accepted to Yale on early admission, whereas I attended community college before transferring to a public institution. Jenna Bennett was the one who got a high-paying marketing position right out of college, whilst I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay off my student loans. But here's what really gets me. Jenna Bennett has a habit of making everything about herself. I mean everything. She revealed her move to New York City during my college graduation banquet. When our grandma died, she used the funeral to inform everyone of her promotion. When I got my first car, she showed up for the family cookout in a shiny new BMW. It's as if she has a radar that detects when no one is looking at her, and she can't bear it. So, when Ethan Miller and I got engaged, I knew I needed to plan our engagement party carefully. I carefully chose a date when Jenna Bennett stated she couldn't make it. She had a work meeting in Denver. I thought, finally. Finally I could have a moment just for me and Ethan Miller. One time where I could enjoy happiness and love without Jenna Bennett stealing the show. I spent weeks planning this celebration. I have been talking for weeks. I made all of the decorations by hand, spent hours finding the ideal music, and even learned how to prepare the elegant hors d'oeuvres I saw on Pinterest. I gathered all of our friends and family, reserved our favorite restaurant's private dining room, and created the most stunning photo presentation of Ethan Miller and myself throughout our relationship. I had trouble sleeping the night before because I was so eager. The party was scheduled to commence at 6 p.m. on Saturday. At 5:30, I'm finishing up my makeup when I receive a text from Jenna Bennett. Surprise! The conference concluded early, and I got the final flight out. I just landed, and am on my way to your little celebration. My heart fell. I just knew she'd find a way to make this about herself. But I reminded myself to keep cheerful. Perhaps she will behave for once. Perhaps she'd simply be glad for me. I should have trusted my gut. The party began well. Everyone was socializing, admiring the decor, and applauding Ethan Miller and me. I felt as if I was shining. Ethan Miller looked stunning in his blue suit, and I adored how he kept his arm around my waist while proudly introducing me as his fiancée. For approximately an hour, everything went perfectly. Then Jenna Bennett arrived. She walked in wearing a magnificent red dress that probably cost more than I make in a month, with her hair flawlessly groomed, as if she had just come off a magazine cover. She made a spectacular entry, hugging everyone tightly, apologizing for being late, and ensuring that everyone noticed her arrival. But I did not mind. I was just glad to see her, and I truly believed she was there to rejoice with us. We were ready to cut the engagement cake when Jenna Bennett stepped up and tapped her champagne glass with a fork. "Excuse me everyone, I have an announcement." My blood turned icy. I looked at Ethan Miller and saw the same dread in his eyes. This was it. This was the moment she was going to take my thunder. "I know this is Emma and Ethan Miller's special day," Jenna Bennett said. And for a brief moment, I assumed she was just going to make a toast. "But I have some news that I just can't keep to myself any longer." She paused for dramatic effect, a familiar smirk developing across her face, the same smirk she'd worn when she announced her Yale acceptance at my high school graduation party. "I'm pregnant." The room exploded. I am not exaggerating. It literally burst with excitement. Everyone began screaming, clapping, and jumping up to congratulate her. My mother broke into floods of pleasure, coming up to hug Jenna Bennett and twirl her around. My father was beaming as if he had just won the jackpot. Our aunts and uncles were literally trampling each other to get to her. I stood there transfixed, clutching the knife we were meant to use to cut our engagement cake. Ethan Miller's arm tightened around my waist, and I could feel his rage spread throughout his body. But Jenna Bennett was not done. Oh no, she wasn't finished. She glanced directly at me, her smirk becoming broader, and added, "Sorry, guess I stole the spotlight again, like I always do." I felt as though I had been slapped. She spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, and a few people chuckled, as if it were a funny sister joke rather than a premeditated hit. But then my mother chimed in, and I really lost it. "Finally, some real exciting news worth celebrating," she shouted, still clutching Jenna Bennett. "I mean, engagements are nice, but a baby, this is what we've all been waiting for." My father nodded excitedly. "Babies are so much more important than simple engagements." "Jenna Bennett, honey, when are you due? Do you know if it's a boy or girl? Have you picked out names?" Everyone chuckled and agreed, quickly focusing their attention on Jenna Bennett. They began asking her a million questions about her pregnancy, due date, symptoms, and plans. The engagement cake was forgotten on the table. The presentation I had spent hours creating was still playing on the screen, but no one was looking at it. I could feel tears in my eyes, but I refused to cry. I wouldn't give Jenna Bennett the joy of witnessing my breakdown. Ethan Miller clasped my hand, whispering, "Let's get out of here." I shook my head. I was not going to run away from my own engagement party. For the next 2 hours, I saw everyone adore Jenna Bennett. They discussed baby names, nursery themes, and pregnancy symptoms. They inquired about the father. Apparently, it's Derek. She has been dating him for 5 months. 5 months. She has known him for less than a year and is pregnant with his child. But that seems more deserving of celebration than my 4-year relationship with Ethan Miller. A few folks approached me during the night to congratulate me on my engagement. However, it felt like an afterthought, as if they were marking something off their social responsibility list before returning to the true thrill of Jenna Bennett's pregnancy. The worst part was having to watch my parents. My mother couldn't stop talking about how she was going to be a grandmother, how she needed to start organizing a baby shower, and how she was going to spoil her grandson rotten. My father was already talking about starting a college fund and teaching the kid to play baseball. They were more pleased about Jenna Bennett's pregnancy with Derek, a guy she'd been casually dating for 5 months, than they had ever been about my engagement to the love of my life. When the celebration finished, folks strolled out, congratulating Jenna Bennett and casually noting my engagement. "Congrats on the baby, Jenna Bennett. Oh, and Emma, nice party. Good luck with the wedding planning." Ethan Miller and I were left to tidy up the decorations and carry away the untouched engagement cake. I finally allowed myself to cry as I put away the Emma and Ethan Miller napkins and took down the streamers I had painstakingly strung that morning. "I can't believe she did that," Ethan Miller exclaimed, his voice filled with rage. "I can't believe your parents just went along with it." "I can," I replied coldly. "This is exactly what I expected would happen." "We should have eloped," he mumbled, tossing crumpled napkins into a garbage bag. "We should have just gone to Vegas and avoided all this family drama." And that's when the idea struck me. That night I was unable to sleep. I kept revisiting the evening in my head, Jenna Bennett's smile, my mother's comment about really wonderful news, my father dismissing our engagement as trivial, and how everyone laughed when Jenna Bennett mentioned stealing the stage. I was finished. I was so tired of being the afterthought, the consolation prize, the less significant sibling. I was tired of Jenna Bennett making everything about her and my parents allowing her conduct. I was done being kind, understanding and taking the high road. I sought vengeance. Around 3 a.m., I shook Ethan Miller awake. "You said we should have eloped," I murmured. "What?" he said, still half sleeping. "You said we should have eloped. Let's do it." He sat up, instantly alert. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Let's go to Vegas this weekend. Let's get married and not tell anyone until after it's done." Ethan Miller remained quiet for a long time. "Emma, are you sure? You've been planning this big wedding for months. You have the venue booked, the dress ordered, the photographer lined up." "I don't care about any of that anymore," I declared. And I meant it. "I want to marry you, Ethan Miller. I want to be your wife. I don't need a big wedding with all the people who think my engagement is less important than Jenna Bennett's accidental pregnancy." "What about your parents? What about Jenna Bennett? They're going to be furious." "Good," I said. "Let them be furious. I'm tired of caring about their feelings when they clearly don't care about mine." We spent the following hour arranging our elopement. We located a chapel in Vegas that could marry us on Saturday, booked flights on Friday night, and reserved a hotel room on the Strip. It was impetuous, crazy, and entirely unlike me. But for the first time in years, I felt in charge of my own life. But this is where my vengeance truly came into play. On Sunday morning, instead of sending out save the dates for our original October wedding, I sent out new ones. But they weren't ordinary save the dates. These were especially created to make a statement. The front of the card had a gorgeous snapshot of Ethan Miller and me from our engagement photos, along with elegant script that read, "Emma and Ethan Miller, just married." Then in smaller print below, "We eloped in Las Vegas on March 15, 2025, surrounded by strangers who were genuinely excited for us." But the back of the card was where I really went for the kill. It reads, "We want to thank everyone who attended our engagement party last Saturday. It was eye-opening to see who actually supported our love and who came for the free food and drinks. We recognized that the most essential thing was not to have a large wedding with people who saw our love as trivial or unimportant in comparison to other life events. Instead, we chose to celebrate our commitment in a setting where strangers applauded us more than some of our own family members did at our engagement party. We got married by Elvis at the Little Chapel of Hearts in Las Vegas, and it was perfect. We laughed, sobbed, and swore to love one another forever, without anyone attempting to take our attention or reduce our happiness. We will host a small celebratory dinner for people who have truly supported us throughout our partnership. If you're not sure if you'll be invited, ask yourself this. Did you congratulate us at our engagement party before congratulating someone else on an unrelated announcement? If the answer is no, you will probably not hear from us. Love, always. Ethan Miller and Mrs. Thompson. P.S. We'll be on honeymoon in Hawaii for the next 2 weeks, so don't anticipate rapid responses to calls or texts. I realize it seems harsh, but I didn't care about being courteous or diplomatic. I was weary of playing the greater guy while everyone else got to be selfish and careless. I had 150 save the dates made overnight by a quick printing firm and sent them out via express delivery on Monday morning to everyone who had been invited to our first wedding. Family, friends, co-workers, everyone. I wanted Jenna Bennett and my parents to get the word loud and clear. Ethan Miller and I left for Vegas on Friday night, and it was the best decision we'd ever made. Our wedding was small, intimate and beautiful. The Elvis impersonation was just hilarious. The chapel was delightfully corny, and we both laughed until we wept. Complete strangers applauded us on the street, brought us drinks and celebrated alongside us as if we were old friends. It was exactly what our engagement party should have been. We were in our hotel room on Sunday night, still dressed for the wedding, ordering room service and looking at our wedding photos, when my phone started going wild. First, it was my mother, then my father, then Jenna Bennett, then my aunts and uncles, then my friends. Text after text, call after call. Everyone was stressing out about the save the dates they had received that day. But word had already spread via family group chats and social media. I disregarded them all. Ethan Miller and I ordered champagne and strawberries and held our own secret party. We were married. We were pleased. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what others thought. But Jennifer Bennett. Jenna Bennett was persistent. She called me a dozen times on Sunday night. 12. When I did not respond, she began messaging. What the hell is wrong with you, Emma? Are you really this petty? Mom and Dad are sobbing. Are you happy now? You are being silly. Emma, I'm pregnant. I'm afraid and excited, and I needed my family's support. You cannot be married without informing anyone. This is ridiculous. Call me back right away. I deleted all texts without responding. Monday morning, she took a different approach. She dialed Ethan Miller's phone. Ethan Miller, please. You have to talk to Emma. She's lost her mind. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Ethan Miller, bless him, has just said, Jenna Bennett. Emma and I are married now. And we're very happy. We're not interested in discussing this further. He hung up. That's when she completely lost it. She began contacting my workplace, my friends, and everyone she could think of who might be able to reach me. She even contacted my best friend Lisa, and cried about how I was wrecking the family and how she hadn't meant to hurt anyone. Lisa, who had been at the engagement party and seen the entire incident, simply told her, Jenna Bennett, you made your bed. Now you have to lie in it. The calls and texts lasted 3 days. By Tuesday, everyone had received their save the dates, and the family drama had reached a boiling point. My parents begged me to come home so that we could talk this through like a family. My relatives and uncles were separated. Some believed I was being overly harsh. Others said Jenna Bennett had it coming. Some of my friends were taken aback by the scathing save the dates, but the majority were secretly proud of me for finally sticking up for myself. But the most unexpected response came from my grandma on my father's side, Grandma Rose. She's 84 years old and has always been the family peacekeeper, resolving problems and encouraging everyone to get along. So when Mom contacted me on Tuesday morning, I believed she was going to give me a sermon about family togetherness and forgiveness. Instead, she stated, Emma, honey, I've been watching this dynamic between you and Jenna Bennett for years, and I should have said something sooner. I was so astonished that I almost dropped my phone. Grandma. Your sister has been doing this stunt since she was 3 years old, and your parents have allowed it because they thought it was easier than dealing with tantrums. But as I watched what transpired at your engagement party and saw how devastated you were, I understood I had also contributed to the problem. She went on to tell me about situations I'd forgotten, such as when I was 7 and won first place in the school science fair, and Jenna Bennett threw such a tantrum that my parents decided to take us both out for ice cream to celebrate Jenna Bennett's participation prize. Or when I was 16 and earned my driver's license, Jenna Bennett announced she was dating the most popular boy in school at my birthday dinner. I kept telling myself Jenna Bennett was just spirited, that she'd grow out of it, Grandma Rose said. But she's 26 years old, Emma. She's a grown woman. And she's still pulling the same stunts she did as a toddler. I never thought you noticed. I murmured with tears flowing down my cheeks. Oh, I noticed. I just didn't want to rock the boat. But honey, sometimes the boat needs to be rocked. Sometimes it needs to be capsized completely. She told me she was pleased with me for finally sticking up for myself, and she thought my save the dates were amazing, albeit a little harsh. She also stated that she had been taking calls from various family members concerning the situation, and her response to every one of them was the same. Emma did what she had to do. That talk meant more to me than words can explain. Knowing that someone else had noticed the pattern, that I wasn't insane or oversensitive, and that my sentiments were real, was extremely healing. The following phone startled me. It was from my cousin Jessica. She's Jenna Bennett's age, and I've always believed she was more like Jenna Bennett than myself. She called on Tuesday afternoon, while Ethan Miller and I were receiving massages at the spa. Emma, I need to tell you something, she said. I've been wanting to say this for years, but I never had the courage. What is it? Jenna Bennett does this to everyone, not just you. She did it at my graduation party when she announced she was moving to New York. She did it at my bridal shower when she made that whole dramatic speech about being single and loving it. She even did it at my baby shower when she spent the entire time talking about her promotion and how she was too busy with her career to think about kids. I had no idea. Jenna Bennett and Jessica had always appeared so close, but Jessica had never mentioned any of this. Why didn't you ever say anything? I requested an explanation. Because I didn't want to cause drama. Because I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. Because Jenna Bennett always made it seem like she was just sharing good news, not trying to upstage anyone. But watching her at your engagement party, seeing that smirk on her face, I realized it was always intentional. Jessica went on to describe additional occurrences, such as family gatherings where Jenna Bennett would arrive with big news just as someone else was being celebrated. She had done it to our other cousins, family acquaintances, and even our great-aunt Margaret, who was celebrating her 50th wedding anniversary. "I think she's been getting away with it because she spreads it around," Jessica told me. "She doesn't target the same person every time, so no one realizes there's a pattern." "But there is a pattern, Emma. There's definitely a pattern." This revelation was both affirming and frustrating. It meant Jenna Bennett's behavior was more than just sibling rivalry or family dynamics. It was a deliberate habit of attention-seeking that she'd been repeating with other people for years. By Wednesday morning, I had received messages from folks I hadn't heard from in years. Jenna Bennett's high school classmates remembered her performing similar exploits at school functions. College classmates had observed her behavior at several parties. Even some of Ethan Miller's acquaintances said that Jenna Bennett made comments or statements that appeared to be intended to divert attention away from others. The most unexpected communication came from my former roommate, Kelly, with whom I lived during my junior year of college. She sent me a lengthy text. "Emma, I've been following this drama through mutual friends, and I have to tell you, Jenna Bennett called me 3 years ago when you got promoted at work. She was asking all these questions about your relationship with Ethan Miller, about your job, about your plans for the future. At the time, I thought she was just being a concerned sister, but now I'm wondering if she was gathering information to use against you somehow." The more I discovered about Jenna Bennett's pattern of behavior, the angrier I felt. She was more than just impetuous and attention-seeking. She was also strategic. She was calculating. She had been purposefully damaging other people's happiness for years. But the message that really got to me came from Amanda, my best friend from high school, with whom I had lost touch after graduation. She sent me this Facebook message. "Emma, I saw your cousin post about your situation on social media, and I had to reach out. I've been thinking about this for years, and I think Jenna Bennett is the reason we lost touch." She went on to say that after our high school graduation, Jenna Bennett contacted and told her that I was too busy with my new college pals to maintain old friendships. She said I had specifically informed her that I didn't want to keep in touch with individuals from high school since I was moving on to bigger and better opportunities. "I was so hurt," Amanda wrote. "I thought you'd become stuck up and didn't want to be friends with someone who was going to community college. I never reached out because I thought you looked down on me. But seeing how Jenna Bennett treated you at your engagement party, I'm starting to wonder if she lied to me about what you said." I was devastated. Amanda had been one of my closest friends, and I'd always wondered why she stopped responding to my phone calls and messages after graduation. I imagined she was preoccupied with her own affairs, but it turned out Jenna Bennett had purposefully harmed our friendship. I immediately called Amanda and we spoke for 2 hours. She told me she'd always regretted losing touch with me and had considered reaching out over the years but was too embarrassed by the mistake. We made plans to meet up when I returned from my honeymoon. These discussions were eye-opening in the most unpleasant way. They demonstrated that Jenna Bennett's behavior was more than just a family issue. It was a pattern that had influenced many aspects of my life. She had been eroding my relationships, accomplishments, and happiness for years, and I had been too close to the issue to see it properly. Throughout it all, Ethan Miller was great. He listened to every phone conversation, held me while I wept, and never indicated that I was exaggerating or being overly dramatic. He'd seen some of Jenna Bennett's conduct over the years, but he was astounded by the severity of it. "I'm very sorry," he remarked after I told him about Amanda. "I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this for so long without realizing what was happening." "I feel so stupid," I said. "How didn't I see it? How could I have missed the fact that she was doing this intentionally?" "Because you're a good person," he replied. "You have a positive attitude toward everyone, especially your family. You wanted to think that Jenna Bennett's actions were merely a coincidence or bad timing, not evil intent." That night, I reached a choice. I wasn't going to ignore Jenna Bennett's calls and texts anymore. I was going to block her phone number totally. I was going to block her on all social media platforms. I was going to cut off all contact, at least until I could comprehend what I'd discovered. I also decided to contact some of the people who had been affected by Jenna Bennett's actions throughout the years. I wanted to apologize for not recognizing what was going on sooner, and I wanted to try to heal some of the relationships that had been harmed by her intervention. The conversation with Amanda was only the beginning. I reconnected with several old friends who had been driven away by Jenna Bennett's deception and manipulation. I had open discussions with family members about the pattern of behavior that we had all observed but never addressed. I even contacted some of Ethan Miller's friends to apologize for Jenna Bennett's inappropriate comments and behavior at various events over the years. It was exhausting and emotional, but also liberating. For the first time in my life, I saw Jenna Bennett's behavior objectively, without the filter of family loyalty, or the assumption that she meant well. Then, on Wednesday, I received the call I had been waiting for. I was lying by the hotel pool on Maui, sipping a Mai Tai and reading a book, when my phone rang. Jenna Bennett's name flashed across the screen. I almost didn't respond, but something compelled me to. "What do you want, Jenna Bennett?" "Emma, please, we need to talk. I am at the airport. I'm flying to Hawaii." I sat up so fast that I almost knocked over my drink. "You are what?" "I'm coming to Hawaii. I need to see you. We need to remedy this." "Jenna Bennett, you're not flying to Hawaii. Ethan Miller and I are on a honeymoon, our honeymoon after our wedding, which you tried to destroy." I didn't intend to damage anything. I was thrilled with my pregnancy and wanted to share it with my family, at my engagement party. "Jenna Bennett, you announced your pregnancy at my engagement party and then smirked for stealing the show. Do not attempt to change history." I was joking. That was a joke. I didn't expect you to take it so seriously. "Is this a joke? You thought humiliating me in front of all my friends and family was funny?" "I did not humiliate you. You announced your pregnancy at my engagement party, said you stole the spotlight like you always do, and then watched while mom and dad dismissed my engagement as less important than your accidental pregnancy with a guy you've known for 3 months. She was silent for a long time. Then, in a lower voice, she said, "Derek and I broke up." "What?" "Derek and I have broken up. When I told him about the pregnancy, he declared he wasn't ready to become a father and fled. I'm going to be a single mother. Emma. I am afraid." So there it was. The true reason she called. Not because she felt horrible about what she had done, but because her perfect little pregnancy announcement had gone wrong, and she now needed help. "I am sorry that happened to you, Jenna Bennett. I actually am. But this does not change what you did to me. But I need you, Emma. I need my family. I made a mistake, okay? I apologize. I sincerely apologize." "You're sorry Derek left you. You are not sorry for what you did to me. That's not true, isn't it? If Derek was still in the picture, and your pregnancy announcement had gone as planned, would you call me to apologize? Would you have considered how your actions affected me at my engagement party?" She didn't respond, which was enough. "Jenna Bennett. I have spent my entire life being understanding of your behavior. I have made excuses for you. I have taken the high road. I have been a bigger person. But I am done. I'm done being your fallback plan when your real life fails. You are my sister, and mine. But you have never acted as such. You've spent our entire lives competing against me rather than supporting me. You've made everything about you, and I've allowed it, because I love you and want to keep the peace. But I am married now, Jenna Bennett. I have a husband who loves me and prioritizes me, and I am not going to let you, or anybody else, treat me as an afterthought anymore." "So that's it? You're just going to cut me out of your life?" "I am going to quit allowing you to hurt me. If you want to be in my life, you must earn it. You'll have to show that you can be happy for me without making it about yourself. You'll have to show me that you're concerned about my feelings and happiness. I do care. No, you do not. You want me to be there for you when you need me. There is a distinction." She began crying. Loud, dramatic sobs that I'd heard 1,000 times before. "Please don't do this, Emma. I'm pregnant and alone, and I need my family. You should have considered that before announcing your pregnancy at my engagement party, and then smirking about stealing the show." I said I was sorry. "No. You admitted you made a mistake. You said you were joking. You claimed you didn't mean to hurt anyone. But you never sincerely apologized for what you did. You never admitted that it was incorrect. You just want me to get over it so you can continue to treat me any way you want. That's not, I don't." "Jenna Bennett. I'm going to hang up now. I'm on my honeymoon with my husband, and I'm not going to let you destroy it either." "Emma, wait." I hung up. Ethan Miller gazed at me from his lounge chair. "How do you feel?" "Good," I replied, and I meant it. I feel really good. The rest of our honeymoon was fantastic. We flew from Vegas to Maui for a week of snorkeling, hiking, eating delicious food, and discussing our future plans. We discussed the house we wanted to buy, the children we wanted to have, and the travels we wanted to take. We discussed everything, except my family drama. When we returned home, there were flowers waiting for us. My parents sent me 24 roses with a card saying, "We're sorry, we love you, please call us." Jenna Bennett sent a tiny bouquet of daisies with a letter that simply said, "I'm sorry, I love you." I arranged the flowers in vases, but did not call anyone immediately away. I needed time to digest what had transpired. A week later, my mother called. "Emma, honey, please, can we talk? Can you and Ethan Miller come over for dinner? I promise Jenna Bennett won't be here." I consented, primarily because I missed my parents and wanted to know if they were truly sorry, or if they were just trying to smooth things over. The dinner was odd at first. My folks were walking on eggshells, overly polite and cautious with their remarks. But eventually we started communicating openly. "We were wrong," my father remarked. "We were so caught up in the excitement of Jenna Bennett's news that we forgot it was your special day. That wasn't fair to you." "We've always made excuses for Jenna Bennett's behavior," my mom said. "We told ourselves that she was just excited, that she didn't mean any harm. But watching you walk away from your own engagement party, seeing how hurt you were, we realized we've been enablers." "Jenna Bennett has always been dramatic," my father explained. "Even as a little kid, she needed to be the center of attention. We thought it was cute when she was 5. But we should have corrected it instead of encouraging it. We're proud of you for standing up for yourself," my mother told me. "We don't like the way you did it. But we understand why you felt you had to." It was the first time my parents had acknowledged Jenna Bennett's pattern of behavior, or admitted to being part of the problem. It did not solve everything, but it was a start. "What about Jenna Bennett?" I questioned. "How is she doing?" "She's struggling," my mother explained. "Being pregnant and alone is hard. She's about 7 months along now. But she's also doing some soul searching. She's been going to therapy." "Good," I said. "She needs it." "She wants to talk to you," my father remarked. "She's been working on a real apology. Not just, 'I'm sorry you were hurt,' but taking responsibility for her actions." "I'm not ready for that yet," I said. "Honestly, maybe someday. But not yet." They accepted it, and we spent the remainder of the evening discussing various topics. They inquired about our wedding, honeymoon, and future plans. They were really concerned for our satisfaction, rather than just going through the motions. It's been 4 months since the engagement party fiasco and our unexpected elopement. Jenna Bennett has reached out several times, but I have yet to answer. I know she had a baby, a young girl named Lily, and she is still unmarried. A part of me feels horrible for her. But a larger part of me is still enraged. My parents have made an attempt to improve their relationship with Ethan Miller and myself. They've invited us over for supper several times and have shown real interest in our life. They're enthusiastic about the house we're buying and have been supportive of my choice to return to school for my master's degree. My friends have been fantastic. Most of them have informed me that they have been waiting years for me to confront Jenna Bennett. Lisa stated she was very proud of me for finally prioritizing myself. Even some of my extended family members have contacted me to express their support for my decision. The "Savage Save the Dates" are legendary in our family. My relative shared one on social media, with my permission, and it became viral. Thousands more individuals commented on their own family dramas, saying they wished they had the bravery to do what I did. The nicest aspect of it all, however, is my marriage. Ethan Miller and I are ecstatic. We are a team, and we will always support one another. He has never made me feel horrible about how I handled things with Jenna Bennett. He's never pressed me to forgive her or reconcile with her. He simply loves me and supports my decisions. We're talking about having children in a few years, and I know that when we do, our children will be raised to assist rather than compete with one another. They will learn that love is not a limited resource and that celebrating someone else's happiness does not lessen your own. I am not sure if Jenna Bennett and I will ever have a meaningful relationship again. Maybe eventually, if she does the work and shows me she has truly changed. But for now, I'm concentrating on my own happiness and life. I am done being the bigger person. I'm done making excuses for other people's poor behavior. I'm done putting everyone else's sentiments ahead of my own. I'm Claire Bennett now, and I'm finally living life on my own terms. And you know what? It feels incredible. Update. It's been 8 months since I first posted this, and I thought I'd provide an update because so many people have asked. First, Ethan Miller and I are doing fantastic. We purchased our house, and I began my master's program. Ethan Miller received a raise at work, and we are planning a trip to Europe next year. We're definitely considering starting a family in the next few years, and I've never been happier. My parents and I have repaired our relationship. They have consistently been supportive and respectful of my boundaries. They never bring up Jenna Bennett unless I ask, and they've stated unequivocally that they understand why I did what I did. Jenna Bennett's situation is more difficult. She contacted me 2 months ago with a long letter, an actual letter. Handwritten, not via text or email. In it, she accepted full responsibility for her actions, not only at my engagement party, but throughout our lives. She admitted to being selfish and attention-seeking, and she apologized for all the times she stole my moments or made everything about herself. She also informed me about her therapy sessions and how she has been trying to figure out why she felt compelled to compete with me rather than encourage me. She said that she was insecure and jealous of me, which surprised me because I had always thought she was the more accomplished person. The letter was different. It felt real, unlike her past apologies. She did not make excuses or attempt to defend her actions. She just owned it. But here's the thing. I'm still not prepared. Maybe I'll never be. The pain is too deep, and I'm finally content without the drama and stress that comes with attempting to control Jenna Bennett's emotions and conduct. I responded with a short note, recognizing her letter and wishing her well, but making it obvious that I'm not ready for a relationship right now. I told her I was delighted she was getting help, and wished she could be the person her daughter deserved. Some folks believe I am being too tough. They believe I should forgive her and go forward. However, I've learned that forgiveness does not imply that you must accept someone back into your life. I can forgive Jenna Bennett for my own peace of mind while still protecting myself from further harm. I'm not the same person I was a year earlier. I am stronger, more confident, and more eager to advocate for myself. I have a spouse who loves me unconditionally, parents who see me as a person rather than Jenna Bennett's sister, and friends who support my decisions. I do not regret how I handled things. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Was it petty? Maybe. However, it was also necessary. It was the wake-up call my family required. And that was the moment I quit being a doormat. Sometimes you have to burn bridges to see the road forward. And occasionally, the individuals who are intended to be in your life will forge new paths to reach you. I'm finished apologizing for putting myself first. I'm done feeling bad about demanding basic respect and regard. I'm tired of being the family scapegoat, expected to accept whatever conduct others dish out. I am Claire Bennett. And I'm finally living my life for myself. My parents forged my signature and erased me from my grandma's will. They thought I wouldn't notice because I was always the quiet one. They took my name off the house my grandmother left me. They forged my signature, sold the lie to my sister, and assumed I'd never notice, because I never caused trouble. But this time, I didn't stay quiet. This time, I became the storm they never saw coming. My name's Emily, and I'm 29 years old. If you met my family, you probably wouldn't notice me at first. And if you asked them to describe me, they'd say something like, she's quiet, keeps to herself. Or worse, she doesn't need much. Sounds harmless, right? Like I'm the easy one, the low-maintenance daughter, the one who doesn't cause problems. But let me ask you something. What happens to the kid who never causes problems? She disappears. That's how it's always been. My younger sister Ashley is the golden one. She lights up a room. Everyone says that. She cries and the world rearranges itself to soothe her. She changes her hair and it becomes a family event. When I graduated college while juggling 3 jobs, no one even looked up from their phones. I used to think it was my fault. Maybe I wasn't pretty enough. Maybe I wasn't expressive enough. Maybe I just didn't shine the right way. I don't remember when I stopped trying to be seen. But I remember exactly when I started paying attention. I started noticing patterns. How Ashley could make one mistake and be comforted, while I could achieve something huge and be met with silence. How her birthdays turned into photo shoots while mine got forgotten, twice. And still, I stayed quiet, reliable, present. Until one day, I found out something that turned my stomach cold. They were selling the house. My grandmother's house. The one she left behind for both of us in her will. Except when I checked the documents, my name wasn't on them, not anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I got up, shut my laptop, and knew, this time, I wouldn't let it slide. If they wanted to treat me like a shadow, I was going to show them what happens when the shadow steps into the spotlight. I wasn't always invisible, at least I don't think I was. I mean, I have vague memories, flickers of my mom brushing my hair before school, or my dad clapping when I spelled dinosaur right at the 2nd grade spelling bee. But my parents forged my signature and erased me from my grandma's will. They thought I wouldn't notice because I was always the quiet one. They took my name off the house my grandmother left me. They forged my signature, sold the lie to my sister, and assumed I'd never notice, because I never caused trouble. But this time, I didn't stay quiet. This time, I became the storm they never saw coming. My name's Emily, and I'm 29 years old. If you met my family, you probably wouldn't notice me at first. And if you asked them to describe me, they'd say something like, she's quiet, keeps to herself. Or worse, She doesn't need much. Sounds harmless, right? Like I'm the easy one. The low-maintenance daughter. The one who doesn't cause problems. But let me ask you something. What happens to the kid who never causes problems? She disappears. That's how it's always been. My younger sister Ashley is the golden one. She lights up a room. Everyone says that. She cries and the world rearranges itself to soothe her. She changes her hair and it becomes a family event. When I graduated college while juggling 3 jobs, no one even looked up from their phones. I used to think it was my fault. Maybe I wasn't pretty enough. Maybe I wasn't expressive enough. Maybe I just didn't shine the right way. I don't remember when I stopped trying to be seen. But I remember exactly when I started paying attention. I started noticing patterns. How Ashley could make one mistake and be comforted, while I could achieve something huge and be met with silence. How her birthdays turned into photo shoots while mine got forgotten, twice. And still, I stayed quiet. Reliable. Present. Until one day, I found out something that turned my stomach cold. They were selling the house. My grandmother's house. The one she left behind for both of us in her will. Except when I checked the documents, my name wasn't on them. Not anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I got up, shut my laptop, and knew, this time, I wouldn't let it slide. If they wanted to treat me like a shadow, I was going to show them what happens when the shadow steps into the spotlight. I wasn't always invisible, at least I don't think I was. I mean, I have vague memories, flickers of my mom brushing my hair before school, or my dad clapping when I spelled dinosaur right at the 2nd grade spelling bee. But they're faint. Blurry. Like remembering a dream after it's already started slipping away. By the time Ashley was born, I was 6. Old enough to understand when everything shifted. It started small. She'd cry in the middle of the night and suddenly, my bed was moved into the hallway so they could make her nursery quieter. She got a fever and the entire house shut down. I got the flu? I was handed a ginger ale and told to, tough it out, champ. I adapted. Like kids do. I stopped asking for things. I stopped trying to be a problem. I became helpful. Quiet. Predictable. They loved that. She's so independent, my dad would say proudly, patting my shoulder like I was a little employee. You're our easy one, my mom told me once. Thank God for you. At the time I smiled. I thought that meant I was special. But being the easy one doesn't make you special. It just makes you easier to forget. Ashley was everything I wasn't. Messy, loud, magnetic. She'd throw tantrums and get ice cream afterward. She broke a neighbor's window and got defended for being creative. I once lost a library book and spent 3 weeks grounded. I kept my head down. Got good grades. Didn't make noise. And they rewarded me for it. By pretending I didn't exist. When I got into NYU, I told them in the kitchen during dinner. Ashley had just gotten her learner's permit. She held it up for everyone to see, and suddenly the whole evening was about how proud they were of her. No one asked me what I'd study. No one mentioned it again. I didn't cry. Instead, I got a second job to save for the deposit. When I moved out, no one helped me pack. Ashley had cheer tryouts. My mom was busy with hair appointments. My dad texted, "Good luck, kiddo." And that was that. College was the first time I felt air in my lungs. The first time I spoke and someone actually listened. Professors saw me. Friends invited me places. Roommates asked about my life. It was dizzying, honestly, to feel seen. I called home every Sunday out of habit. They'd ask, "How's school?" And I'd start to answer. But then Ashley got accepted into a sorority, or had a new boyfriend, or dyed her hair purple, and suddenly, my updates became background noise. By junior year, I stopped calling. When I graduated summa cum laude, I mailed the announcement card. Just one envelope, no response. Ashley was going on a graduation trip to Cabo. It was all over Facebook. So I stopped expecting things. I learned to fill the gaps myself. Holidays? I worked doubles? Birthdays? I bought myself a cupcake and lit the candle. When I got promoted at work, I celebrated with my cat. But here's the thing no one tells you about being the strong one. Eventually they stop checking if you're okay. Because they assume you always will be. Ashley could fail a class and it was a family crisis. I could get promoted twice in 1 year and hear nothing but silence. The only person who ever noticed me was my grandmother. She was quiet too, in the same way I was. Gentle, observant, sharp behind the eyes. She was the only person who remembered my birthday without Facebook. The only person who asked questions and waited for the answers. When I told her about my promotion, she cried. She said, "They don't see you, but I do." She was the first person who ever said that out loud. She passed away 2 years later. At the wake, everyone was there, all dressed in muted grays, crying in public like it was a performance. My dad gave a eulogy that sounded like it came from a Hallmark card. Ashley sobbed loudly. Her makeup ran. People handed her tissues like she was the leading actress in some grief production. I just sat in the third pew, hands folded. Tears silent. She had left us something, her house. The place we all grew up in. The one with the green shutters and creaky porch swing. She said it would go to both of us. Me and Ashley. Equally. That was in the will. I saw it. But last month I overheard something that made my stomach flip. Ashley was showing a friend photos of a renovation. New backsplash, hardwood floors, a walk-in closet. It's going to be mine, she said casually. We're listing Emily as having declined the inheritance. Made everything easier. I laughed. I thought it was a joke. Then I checked the county records. My name was gone. I hadn't declined anything. I hadn't even been informed. That was the moment. The fracture. The match hitting dry kindling. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was the forgotten one. Erased. Silenced. And I was done playing that role. I didn't confront anyone. Not right away. That's the thing about people who've been overlooked their whole lives. We learn how to wait. We watch. We collect receipts while everyone else forgets we're even in the room. So I waited. I smiled through family group chats where Ashley posted house inspo like she was Joanna Gaines. I nodded along to my mom's passive little comments like, well, you always said you didn't want a big house, right? Or, losing the house probably takes a weight off your shoulders. I hadn't said either of those things. What I had said, months ago, was that I was too swamped at work to think about moving right now. That was it. That one sentence had apparently become their legal justification for pretending I didn't exist. Fine, if they wanted to play the game that way, I could too. Except I wouldn't play it loud. I'd play it smart. I started with the will. My grandmother's attorney was retired, but still lucid, still sharp. He remembered me. I drove out to the edge of town and sat in his dusty little office while he dug through a file cabinet older than the internet. When he found the copy, he frowned. She was very clear, he said. 50-50 split between you and your sister. Can I get a certified copy? I asked. He nodded. You'll want that. The next stop was the county clerk's office. I requested the title history on the property, acting casual, like I was just curious. The woman behind the desk printed it out for me with a tight smile. And there it was. My name had been removed. The date? 2 months after Grandma died. Signed. Witnessed. Processed. But the signature wasn't mine. It was my name. But it wasn't my handwriting. Not even close. My hands were cold as I stared at the page. They didn't just forget to include me. They forged my consent. I walked out of the clerk's office shaking. Not with fear. With adrenaline. The kind of slow, seething charge that builds when something snaps after too many years under pressure. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was fraud. And that changed everything. I called a lawyer the next day. Her name was Dana. Calm. Surgical. No nonsense. The kind of woman who could dismantle a family legacy with one well-worded letter. She reviewed the documents I brought her and didn't even blink. They're banking on the fact that you wouldn't notice, or if you did, you wouldn't push back. They're wrong, I said. Good, she replied, sliding me a stack of forms. Let's make them remember. We filed for a formal title dispute and launched a forensic handwriting review. I signed affidavits. I authorized contact with the attorney who'd handled the will. I gave her permission to subpoena digital correspondence if needed. Dana worked fast. Quiet. Lethal. And then, I waited. That was the hardest part. Not screaming. Not posting about it. Not texting my sister something unhinged at 2 a.m. But I stayed silent. Because I wanted them to feel safe for just a little bit longer. I wanted Ashley to keep uploading paint swatches to her Instagram story. I wanted my parents to keep forwarding emails about investment opportunities tied to a house they no longer legally owned. I wanted them to have no idea that the ground beneath them had already started shifting. 3 weeks later, the first letter went out. A cease and desist to my parents. One to Ashley. Another to the real estate agent they were working with. The calls started the next day. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and watched as voicemail after voicemail stacked up on my phone. First my mom, then my dad, then Ashley. Her message was a masterpiece of faux confusion. Emily, hey, we didn't know you'd care about the house. You always said you didn't feel connected to it. Why are you doing this? I didn't respond. Not yet. Because the forensic analyst called that afternoon. It's not your handwriting, he said plainly. And it doesn't even match previous samples. It looks like someone copied your name off an old signature and tried to trace it. He paused. Whoever did this wasn't being careful. They assumed no one would ever look. They were half right, I said. Until now. I forwarded the results to Dana. The next letter we sent was a formal demand to restore my name on the title. Pending that, we reserved the right to pursue criminal charges. Dana drafted every word with surgical precision. The day it hit their inbox, everything went silent. No calls, no texts, no family updates about Ashley's new backsplash. Just dead air. And I liked it that way. It happened on a Sunday. The kind of day you'd expect to be quiet, slow, safe. I was halfway through cleaning out my fridge when the buzzer rang. I didn't recognize the number. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Then my phone lit up with a text. We're downstairs. We just want to talk. My mom. I froze. I hadn't seen them in person since the funeral. Even then, it had been brief, awkward, sanitized. A handshake of grief. Nothing honest. I thought about not answering. But then again, I wasn't hiding. Not anymore. So I went downstairs. They were waiting by the curb. My mom in her sunglasses, the kind she wears when she wants to look composed. My dad standing beside her like a statue that forgot how to be human. And Ashley, leaning against the car, arms crossed, like she was bored. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. We didn't know, my mom started, her voice breathy. About the paperwork. We had no idea someone forged. You signed it, I said flatly. All of you did. She looked startled. It was just. We thought maybe it'd be easier. For everyone. Easier? I repeated. Easier to pretend I didn't exist? Ashley jumped in. You were never around, Emily. You moved away, you never came home. You made it clear you didn't want to be part of things. No, I said. Calm. Even. I stopped coming home because home stopped including me. They didn't respond to that. Not right away. My dad finally cleared his throat. Look, this doesn't have to become some legal war. We're still family. I stared at him. When did I stop being treated like family? He didn't answer. My mom reached out like she might touch my arm, but I stepped back. Not dramatically. Just enough to say no. You didn't just forget me, I continued. You rewrote the script and edited me out. We thought you'd be okay, she said softly. You always are. That was the sentence. The one that cracked something open. Because that's what it always came down to, right? I was strong, so they didn't need to care. I was stable, so they invested in the chaos instead. I was quiet, so they mistook it for consent. I'm not here for an apology, I said. I don't need one. And I don't believe it would be real anyway. Ashley scoffed. So why are you doing all this? For the house? For the money? I looked her dead in the eye. I'm doing it because I exist. And I'm not letting you erase me. Not again. Not ever. My dad exhaled sharply, like that physically hurt him. Maybe it did. Good. My mom's lips trembled. We didn't think you'd fight back like this. I know. I let the silence settle after that. Then I turned and walked back up the steps to my building. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew they were watching. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was fine with that. After the confrontation, the silence got louder. I didn't hear from them for nearly a week. No texts, no emails, no surprise visits. Just pure, echoing nothing. And I'll admit, part of me waited for it. For someone to say, you're right. We messed up. But it never came. Because people like them don't apologize. They recalculate. The next thing I heard wasn't from my parents. It was from Dana, my lawyer. They've retained counsel, she told me over the phone. Which means they're not trying to sweep this under the rug anymore. I closed my eyes, let that sink in. What does that mean for us? It means they're taking you seriously, she said. Finally. We filed a formal challenge to reinstate my legal interest in the property. The forensic handwriting expert submitted their affidavit. Dana drafted a petition for intent to pursue damages related to fraud and loss of equitable interest. It got their attention. The house went off the market within 48 hours. And suddenly, they weren't pretending I didn't exist anymore. They were treating me like a threat. Which, honestly, felt like progress. 2 days later, I got an email from a local reporter. Someone had tipped them off about the title dispute. They were doing a feature on inheritance fraud and sibling manipulation in estate cases. Would I be willing to talk? I didn't answer right away. I sat with it for hours. Part of me still felt the old reflex. Keep it quiet. Don't stir the pot. Don't make a scene. But then I remembered. They already made the scene. They just didn't expect me to step onto the stage. So I agreed. On the condition of anonymity. The article went live the following week. It was clean, professional, a little dry. But it got shared. A lot. Comments poured in. Stories from people who'd been pushed out of inheritances, who were called selfish for speaking up, who had watched younger siblings take everything and be congratulated for it. I wasn't alone. Not even close. The next surprise came in the form of a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to look. It was my aunt. My dad's sister. We hadn't spoken in years. Not out of malice. Just distance. Family gatherings fell apart after my grandmother died, and no one ever rebuilt the bridges. But she was standing there with a folder in one hand and something that looked an awful lot like regret in her eyes. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded. She sat at my kitchen table like it physically hurt her. She placed the folder between us. "I saw the article," she said. "And I need you to know. I believe you." I blinked. "Okay. And more than that," she continued. "I've seen things. For years. The way your parents treat you. The way Ashley's been propped up like the second coming of royalty while you were treated like staff." That got a laugh out of me. Bitter. Short. She opened the folder. Inside were old emails. Handwritten notes. Copies of conversations she'd had with my parents when the estate was being settled. "There was pressure to make things easy," she said. "Your dad didn't think you'd care. Your mom said you were always so independent, but I knew something was off when I saw your name disappear from the paperwork." I didn't say anything, I just kept reading. Each page was a thread, and together they wove a very clear picture. They hadn't just excluded me, they'd planned to. She reached into her purse, pulled out a check. "This isn't to fix anything," she said. "But if you decide to take them to court, I want to help cover your legal fees." I stared at the check. Not for the money. For the fact that it came with something I hadn't felt from anyone in my family in years. Allegiance. "I'm not looking to burn everything down," I said softly. "I know," she replied. "But you deserve to hold the match. Just in case." The truth is, I never cared that much about the house. Yeah, I said it. Not because it didn't matter. It did. It held every version of me that my parents ignored. The swing on the porch where I used to read Goosebumps books during summers. The scratch in the doorframe marking my height at age 9, back when someone still paid attention to things like that. The kitchen where Grandma taught me how to make peach cobbler and whispered, "You're the sharp one, Emily. They just don't see it yet." It mattered. But it wasn't about square footage or mortgage rights or hardwood floors. It was about history. About the fact that someone had finally drawn a line in my favor, and they had erased it without blinking. That's what I couldn't forgive. So when the reporter followed up asking if I wanted to go on record, fully, publicly, I took a breath and said yes. Not because I wanted to shame my family, but because for the first time in my life, I had something they couldn't edit, minimize, or delete. My voice. The piece ran 2 weeks later. Not in a tabloid. Not on some gossipy subreddit. In a real publication, under the headline, "When the Quiet One Fights Back, a story of inheritance, erasure, and visibility." My name was right there. Emily Parker. I'd never seen it look so powerful. People shared it. People I hadn't spoken to in years texted me. Professors, old classmates, even a former manager. Some of the messages were short, just, "I see you." Others poured out paragraphs, stories of their own silencing, their own golden child siblings, their own battle scars from families who mistook silence for weakness. Even Dana was surprised. "Most inheritance disputes stay in the dark," she said. "But you brought this one into the light, and you didn't flinch." I did flinch though, alone. At night. When the adrenaline faded and all that was left was the ache. Because no matter how justified I was, this wasn't victory. Not yet. That came one morning when I opened my inbox and saw a message from the county clerk's office. Subject. Title correction approved. Body. Your name has been reinstated on the deed to 314 Willow Lane per court order and consent decree. Full legal interest restored. Attached, updated title record. I just stared at the screen. No champagne pop. No celebratory playlist. Just stillness. Then I did something weird. I laughed. Not loud. Not joyful. More like a release. Because it wasn't just my name that had been restored. It was the reality of what I'd always known but had never been allowed to say. I was never the problem. I printed the title. Framed it. Hung it on the wall above my desk. Not because I cared about the property, but because it was a physical, undeniable reminder that I existed. I mattered. I left a paper trail. And no one erased me this time. That weekend I went back to the house. Alone. It was still empty. Cold. Echoing in ways I didn't expect. I walked through each room slowly. Let the dust cling to my shoes. Let the silence settle around me like a blanket I'd outgrown. I stood in the kitchen where Grandma used to hum Patsy Cline. Ran my fingers along the windowsill where my science fair project once exploded. Paused at the hall closet where I used to hide after dinner when things got loud and sharp and too much. Then I sat on the front steps and watched the light spill across the porch. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to notice me. I wasn't hoping to be called inside. I wasn't holding my breath for a crumb of recognition. I just sat. Because I belonged. Because this space, and this story, had always been mine too. And now finally, they knew it. The messages started the same day the article dropped. Not from strangers. From family. Voicemails. Texts. DMs I didn't even know they knew how to send. First came the confusion. Dad. Why would you go public like this? We could have handled this privately. Mom. Emily, you're making us sound like monsters. That wasn't our intention. You know that. Ashley. Congrats on the clout, I guess. Hope it was worth blowing up the family. Then came the guilt. Or their version of it. Dad again. We were wrong. I see that now. I just didn't realize how much we hurt you. I'm sorry, kiddo. Mom. I wish you had told me sooner how much this meant to you. Maybe we could have fixed it. But that was the thing. I had told them. 1,000 different ways. Every achievement I shared that got brushed aside. Every quiet question I asked. Hoping for a real answer. Every time I stepped out of the spotlight, thinking maybe, just maybe, that would finally earn their love without demanding it. They just hadn't been listening. So this time, I didn't rush to reply. I didn't reply at all. Not for days. I spent that weekend cleaning out old folders, unsubscribing from junk emails, and reorganizing my bookshelf. There was something almost spiritual about deleting the group chat thread with my parents, like clearing mental storage space. They still existed. They just didn't take up the same room in my head anymore. On Monday I got a certified letter. It was from their lawyer. No lawsuit. No threats. Just a settlement offer. They were willing to discuss a buyout if I wanted to walk away from the property. Apparently Ashley still wanted the house. I sat with that for a long time. Not because I wanted the money. I didn't. Not because I was tempted. I wasn't. But because the offer felt like what it always was with them, a shortcut, a way to throw something at the problem instead of facing what caused it. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Dana. Her reply was one line. Let's make this fun. We rejected the offer, not with anger, not with venom, just clarity. My legal interest wasn't for sale, not to them, not anymore. A few days later, I got a knock on the door. Ashley. No makeup, no filters, just standing there like a ghost who'd gotten lost on the way to a better version of her life. I'm not here to fight, she said. I just want to talk. I let her in. Not out of forgiveness, out of curiosity. She stood in my kitchen, eyes darting, like she was waiting to be yelled at. I didn't know they'd actually take your name off, she said quickly. I thought it was just being shifted around. For paperwork. I didn't say anything. She kept going. I'm not the villain, okay? I didn't ask to be the favorite. They just gave me everything. And I didn't know how to say no. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't proud. She was terrified. Because if I was no longer invisible, then she was no longer untouchable. She stepped toward me. So what happens now? I shrugged. I keep doing what I've always done, just louder this time. She looked down. Do you hate me? I paused. No, I said truthfully. But I don't trust you either. She nodded slowly, like she understood. Then she handed me an envelope. From Mom and Dad. It's... well, you'll see. She left. Quietly. Like she finally understood what that word actually felt like. Inside the envelope was a card. Hallmark, obviously. Gold lettering. Faux sincerity. The message inside was handwritten. Not forged this time. We don't know how to fix what we broke, but we want to try. Please don't shut us out. Mom and Dad. I placed the card on my desk, didn't throw it out, didn't frame it, just let it sit there. Because I wasn't looking for redemption. And I definitely wasn't asking for repair. I had already done the hardest part, choosing myself, even when they didn't. And some bridges aren't meant to be burned, they're meant to be walked away from, calm, proud, on your own 2 feet. I kept the card, not because I needed it, but because it reminded me how far I'd come. At one point in my life, a gesture like that would have cracked me open. I would have clung to it, read into it, replayed it in my head until it morphed into something it never was. I would have mistaken it for love. Now? It was paper. Paper with some ink and a few decades too late. Because here's the truth. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you build. And I was already building mine. A few weeks after the title was restored, I got invited to speak at a community workshop. It was on estate literacy, not a flashy topic, but one that hit home for a lot of people who'd been blindsided the same way I had. I almost said no. But then I thought about how many people out there were like me, the quiet ones, the dependable ones, the ones who got cut out not just from property, but from memory, so I said yes. The room wasn't packed, maybe 20 people, mostly older, some with notebooks, some just there to listen. But when I told my story, the real story, not the headline version, they leaned in. And for the first time, I felt what it meant to not just exist in someone's life, but to be witnessed. After the talk, a woman came up to me in tears. My brother took everything, she said. They said I didn't need it. But I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. You're not. My parents screamed, if you don't like it, get out. Now they're broke, my brother's gone and they came to me. But I said, ask your golden boy. My name is Elias. I am 27 years old. And for as long as I can remember, my life has served as a continual reminder that I was always the second best in my family. I don't complain just for the purpose of complaining, but growing up witnessing your parents give everything to their favorite kid while you make do with scraps fractures something inside you. My brother Luca, who was 5 years my senior, was always the king of the home. I was the one who polished his crown. It all began when we were children. My parents, Victor and Helena, had a unique manner of dispersing their affection and finances. Luca, with his easy smile and I deserve everything attitude, always got the best new clothes, expensive toys, school trips, and even the most spacious room in the house. I, on the other hand, inherited his old clothes, damaged toys, and a mattress that groaned when I moved. If I asked for something, my mother would give me the look that said, "Don't be selfish, Elias. Not everything is for you." My father, on the other hand, would add, "Luca is the oldest, he needs more." As if being younger meant I had no rights. I remember one Christmas when I was around 10 years old. Luca, 15, asked for a mountain bike that cost a fortune. Without hesitation, my parents went into debt to buy it for him. I had requested for a soccer ball with great anticipation. It wasn't pricey, nothing out of the norm. When the day came, I saw Luca riding his new bike around the yard while my mother photographed him like a movie star. In contrast, I received a pair of socks and a cheap plastic ball that shattered after only 3 uses. When I inquired why they didn't get me the ball I wanted, my father looked at me with displeasure and said, "Don't be ungrateful, Elias. We can't spend on everything." But Luca always had money. The distinction became clearer with time. Luca was not exactly a genius. In reality, he barely graduated high school with dismal marks, and showed no desire in furthering his education or obtaining a job. But my parents rationalized everything. My mother would add, "He's a free spirit," as if laziness were a virtue. In contrast, I was always the responsible one. I received decent grades, helped around the house, and when I turned 16, I began working part-time at a grocery store to assist with expenditures. Not because I wanted to, but because they required it. My father Victor was an electrician, but his salary barely covered the essentials. My mother Helena was a homemaker who occasionally sold cakes to supplement her income. However, there were always priorities, and they all revolved around Luca. When he turned 18, my parents purchased him a used automobile. It was not much, but it worked. At that age, I still rode the bus to work. When I inquired why they didn't help me, my mother answered, "Luca needs the car to get around. You can manage." As if my time wasn't valuable. At 20, I graduated from high school with honors and began working full-time at a furniture manufacturer. It wasn't the best work in the world, but it paid well, and I felt glad to contribute to the household. However, my parents were quick to take advantage. "Elias, the bills are tight," my father would tell me each month. "We need you to put in more of your salary." And like an idiot, I did it. I handed over around 70% of my earnings. I paid for energy, water, internet, and even food. Meanwhile, Luca, then 25, did nothing. He spent his days at home, either playing video games, watching television, or going out with his pals. He made no contributions. I was tired up with seeing him laying on the couch as I came home fatigued from work, so I said, "Luca, why don't you look for a job? Even something simple, to help around the house." He chuckled as if I'd made a joke. "Work? Nah, little brother, I wasn't born for that. I was born to enjoy life." Then, with that mocking look I despise, he said, "You keep breaking your back. Someone has to pay the bills." I wanted to punch him, but I refrained. I knew if I did anything, my folks would side with him. They always have. Time passed, and the situation worsened. At 24, I was working double shifts at the factory to make a little extra money. I'd return home at 11 p.m., my arms aching and my back in bits, to find Luca playing on his new console, which my parents had purchased with leftover money. Where are the leftovers from? I was the one who paid for practically everything. I once viewed their internet bill and realized that they had subscribed to the most expensive package, including with premium channels, just so Luca could watch soccer in high definition. When I approached my mother, she told me, "Don't be envious, Elias. Your brother needs a distraction." A diversion from what? After doing nothing all day? I reached my breaking point at the age of 26. My father summoned me to the kitchen, accompanied by my mother, and informed me that they needed me to contribute more money. "The bills are very high, Elias. If you don't put in more, we won't be able to manage." I was already providing over 80% of my earnings. I hardly had enough money to purchase myself clothes or go out with friends once a month. When I asked them what they needed more of, my father seemed nervous and said vague things like, "Prices are going up, and life is expensive." But things did not add up. A month later, I learned the truth. Luca and his buddies had gone on a week-long beach holiday at an all-inclusive resort. How did I find out? Because he shared it all over social media. Photographs of him enjoying beers on the beach and laughing, while I was sweating and moving furniture at the factory. When I arrived home, I faced my parents. "Where did Luca get the money to go on a trip?" I inquired, though I already anticipated the answer. My mother tried to divert the subject, but my father, in his customary authoritative tone, told me, "That's none of your business, you worry about doing your part." I could not handle it anymore. My hands trembled with wrath. My part? I pay for everything in this house. The electricity, the water, the food, even the damn internet so Luca can watch his games. And now you ask for more so he can go on vacation? Why don't you make him work? He's 5 years older than me. My mother remained mute and stared at the floor, but my father became red. "You're not going to come here and tell us how to raise our children," he yelled. "Luca is different. He's not made for work like you are. You work. Your brother enjoys it. It's that simple. And if you don't like it, get out." These words stabbed me like a knife. I looked at my mother, expecting her to say anything or defend me, but she simply nodded, as if she agreed with everything. I felt a knot in my stomach. A combination of wrath and despair. My entire life, I had been the worker, the one who sacrificed, while Luca lived like a king. And now, on top of everything, they were telling me it was my responsibility. But at that moment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to be their victim longer. "Great," I responded with the calmest voice I could muster. "Then I'll leave, and you can pay your own bills. It's that simple." My father's expression changed immediately. It shifted from wrath to amazement, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. My mother raised her head, eyes wide. "You can't do this to us, Elias," she exclaimed, nearly yelling. "We raised you, we gave you everything." I gave out a sour laugh. Everything? The used socks and Luca's leftovers were everything? Without saying anything, I went up to my room, grabbed a rucksack and packed the essentials, clothes, documents, and whatever money I had saved. I did not say farewell. It was not worth it. That night I stayed in a low-cost hotel while looking for a room to rent. It was not simple, but after a week, I had located a little flat. It wasn't much, but it was the first time in my life that I felt I could breathe. But as expected, my parents would not let me go so lightly. The first call arrived 3 days after I moved out. My mother, Helena, used that tone to make me feel guilty. "Elias, how could you do this to us?" she asked, her voice shaking like she was going to cry. "We're your family. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us?" I remained silent and clenched the phone. I wanted to tell her that everything was just leftovers, that they never showed me the same love or support they did Luca. But I didn't. I simply said, "Mom, I'm busy. Goodbye," and hung up. I believed they'd get the message, but I was mistaken. A week later, Victor, my father, called. His voice was coarser as usual, but there was a tinge of desperation that I hadn't heard before. "Elias, this isn't a game," he added. "We need your help. We can't make ends meet, and you know we depend on you. Come home. We can fix this." I laughed. Not because it was hilarious, but because I couldn't believe his boldness. What should be fixed? Will I continue to be your ATM while Luca scrapes his belly? "No, Dad," I responded. "You said it yourself. If I don't like it, I should get out." "Well, I got out. Figure it out yourselves." He hung up without saying anything else, but I knew it wasn't the end of the conversation. The calls became routine. Every day, at different times, my phone would vibrate, displaying my mother's or father's name. Initially, I responded more out of curiosity than anything else. My mother alternated between pleading and emotional blackmail. "Elias, please come back," she'd say. "We can't manage everything. Your brother is very depressed. He's not eating well, not sleeping. Don't you feel bad leaving him like this?" Luca. Depressed? How convenient. The last time I saw him he was playing on his new console, beer in hand, with no concern in the world. When I informed my mother this, she adjusted her tactics. "You're so ungrateful. We raised you, gave you a roof, food, clothes, and now you abandon us as if we were trash." I felt a twinge in my chest, but I was no longer the child who suppressed his shame. "Clothes? You mean Luca's hand-me-downs or the broken mattress you gave me? Don't make me laugh, Mom." So I hung up. In contrast, my father was very forthright. "Elias, you're the man of the house now," he once said to me, as if it were an honorific. "Your brother isn't ready to work. You know how he is. But you're strong. You can handle this. Come back, and I promise things will be different." Different? How? Were they going to assign me the large room and ask Luca to work? Of course not. Everything would remain the same. Me working till I dropped, and Luca living like a prince. "No, Dad," I replied. "If you want money, tell Luca to get a job. He's 32 years old, not a child." He responded with a yell. "Don't you talk about your brother. You don't understand anything." I hung up and stopped returning their calls. One day my mother arrived at the factory where I worked. I'm not sure how she discovered the apartment, but there she was, standing at the door with red eyes and untidy hair. "Elias, please," she begged, disregarding my co-workers walking by. "We can't go on like this. We're going to be evicted if we don't pay the rent. Your father is looking for another job, but it's not enough. You're our only hope." I looked at her and felt pity for a brief minute. But then I remembered how she ignored me and defended Luca while I broke my back. "Mom, I'm not coming back," I stated gently but firmly. "Ask Luca to work. He's the oldest, isn't he? Let him be responsible." She shook her head as if the concept was ludicrous. "Luca can't. You know he's special." "Special?" "No, just a lazy bum who had been spoiled his entire life." I turned and returned to work. When I peered out the window, I noticed her crying as she departed. Following that incident, I decided to block their numbers. I did not want any more drama or blackmail. I wanted to live my life, and for the first time, I was successful. I started getting out more and meeting new people. I made friends at the gym, including boys who invited me to play soccer on weekends. I even met a girl named Maya who worked at a coffee shop near my flat. It wasn't anything serious, but talking with her, joking, and drinking coffee without thinking about household expenditures was something I'd never done before. My salary, which used to disappear into my parents' hands, was now sufficient for me to save, buy things for myself, and live, and most importantly, to feel valued. 3 months had gone, and the peace I had discovered was broken when I received a call from my Aunt Sylvia, my mother's sister. She was always the only family member who treated me fairly. Elias, I don't want to meddle in your affairs. But you need to know what's going on, she added, her tone serious and almost sorrowful. She told me everything. After I departed, my parents tried to keep things as they were. However, without my money, everything fell apart. They couldn't afford to pay their rent or energy, let alone food. At first they assumed Luca would assist them. After all, he was their favorite son, to whom they had always given everything. But when they asked him to find work, Luca laughed in their faces. Me? Work? He asked. I'm not going to support old people. If Elias doesn't want to pay, you figure it out yourselves. He gathered his belongings and left. Nobody knew where he went, but my aunt assumed he was living with one of his pals and presumably wasting the little money he had left. Without Luca and without me, my parents were alone. The landlord of the flat where they lived gave them 1 month to pay what they owed, but they couldn't. They were ejected with no mercy. My father, who always boasted about being the man of the home, had to find employment as a plumber, a vocation he understood little about. He made a pittance, just enough to eat. My mother, who had never worked before, began sewing handmade coats to sell at a local market, but her shaky hands and lack of experience resulted in low-quality coats, and she barely produced enough to cover a couple of meals every day. They were now living in a cramped room in one of the city's most hazardous areas, where the walls were moldy and the stench of garbage permeated through the shattered windows. One day, while drinking coffee with Maya, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Luca. "Hey little brother, how are you?" it asked, as if we were closest buddies. "I hear you're doing well. Can you lend me some money? I'm in a rough patch." I burst out laughing so hard that Maya was shocked. Luca, asking for money, the same person who insulted me for working and said he wasn't cut out for it. I didn't respond. I blocked the phone and resumed drinking my coffee. He could figure it out on his own, just like I did. Now when I think about my family, I don't feel guilty. I feel relieved. My parents created their own calamity by producing a kid like Luca while treating me as a servant. Luca, for his part, was left without a crown, and no one to pay for his desires, while I am finally living for myself. I don't know what will happen to them, and I honestly don't care. Maya sometimes asks if I have any regrets. "They're your parents after all," she replies, with that soft expression that inspires me to be a better person. But I tell her the truth. I don't regret it. They chose Luca, and he abandoned them. I just chose to save myself. She nods. But I know she doesn't completely comprehend. Nobody can understand what I went through until they had lived it themselves. I'm writing this from my flat, with a beer in my hand and music playing in the background. Outside, the city is lit up at night. Tomorrow I have a soccer game with my friends. Maya and I are planning a trip to the beach over the weekend. It's not the ideal existence, but it's mine. Every dollar I make, every laugh I share, and every day I live without the burden of my family is a win. My parents and Luca believed they could use me indefinitely, that I would never revolt. But I did. And today, as they face the consequences of their actions, I am establishing my future. Update. It has been a year since I left my family, and today, as I stroll along the beach with Maya, the sun setting on the horizon, I sense a peace that I never imagined imaginable. My parents and Luca are only distant echoes, stuck in the wreckage of their own decisions. While I create a life for myself, I feel no guilt. Simply the knowledge that I did the right thing by freeing myself. Every stride I take demonstrates that I am more valuable than the scraps they offered me. And that freedom, that fairness, is my greatest accomplishment. Other men find me irresistible. My girlfriend smirked. I canceled 6 cards, 3 bills, and 1 lease. Now she's broke, and begs me for help. My girlfriend told me to step my game up. So I erased her entire lifestyle in 72 hours and watched her crumble without me. I was with one ex for 4 years and wanted to marry her. One night out with friends, I noticed her making out with another guy in a car at a red light. 3 days later, I informed her I was going to see my brother. He never specified where he lived, only that he lived in another state. That happened 30 years ago, and she still does not know where I reside. She has been married and divorced thrice since then. She married the man she cheated on me with, and then cheated on him as well. I've been happily married for 22 years. This is a distinct comment. This guy saw his girl cheating 30 years ago, and instead of making a huge deal about it or attempting to work it out, he simply fled. Clean break. There was no drama, begging, or, "Let's talk about this." Just gone. Look at the findings. She's been married twice and apparently hasn't learned her lesson, as she also cheated on the guy she left for. Meanwhile, he has been happily married for 22 years. 22 years. This is something we frequently discuss. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. This guy didn't need multiple chances or second chances to realize she wasn't bride material. He recognized what he needed to see and made his decision. The fact that she still doesn't know where he lives 30 years later demonstrates a strong dedication to moving forward. This is how you handle betrayal, gentlemen: clean, decisive, and permanent. If you have any stories like these, please share them in the comments. I'll include them in my forthcoming videos. Now let's begin the story. She responded, "I can't help it if other men find me irresistible. Maybe you should step your game up." When I witnessed her offer her phone number to a random guy, I remarked, "You're right." The next day her name was removed from everything I paid for. Her belongings were packed, and her tea did not function. She called me 23 times in one day. I'm 34 years old and male, and Brianna, my now ex-girlfriend of 3 years, said I needed to raise my game. So I stepped it up. Alright. She just didn't expect it to happen this way. Saturday night, we went to Copper Mill, a fashionable bar downtown, to celebrate her buddy Chloe's promotion. The place was packed. A typical weekend crowd, with decent music and plentiful beverages. Brianna looked stunning in her red dress, which cost more than most people's rent. She always dressed to impress. Around 10 p.m., I was talking to a guy about sports when I observed Brianna at the bar with another guy. Tall man, expensive outfit, maybe mid-30s, looked like he stepped out of a magazine. There's nothing odd there. Brianna caught attention everywhere we went. Part of dating someone that resembled her. But then I noticed her laughing at something he said, leaning in closer and taking out her phone. She typed something in, passed it to him, and he typed back. They both put their phones away, and she patted his arm again, laughing. I strolled over, as casual as possible. When the guy noticed me approaching, he quickly disappeared. That was a smart move. "What was that about?" I inquired, maintaining my voice level. Brianna turned around with a smug expression. "Oh, that? Some guy wanted my number, so I gave it to him." "You gave him your number?" I asked. She shrugged as if it was nothing. "I can't help it if other men find me irresistible, Albert. Maybe you should step your game up." The way she said it was condescending and entitled, as if I should be grateful she even bothered with me. Chloe and 2 other friends were observing the entire exchange. Some appeared embarrassed, while others tried not to smile. "You're right," I replied. "I should definitely step my game up." She smiled, supposing she had won something. "Good. I'm glad you finally got it." I grabbed my jacket and walked to the door. Brianna called after me, asking where I was going, but I just continued walking. She'd find out quickly enough. Update 1. The next day, Sunday morning, I awoke with a sharp focus. It's time to amp up my game, as Brianna recommended. The first thing I did was assess our living circumstances. My flat, my contract, and my name solely. Brianna had moved in around 18 months ago but kept putting off signing the lease. Said there was too much paperwork. Her loss. But here's the deal, even though she wasn't on the lease, she had tenant rights after staying there for long enough. We couldn't just kick her out legally, that would require several weeks of sufficient warning, so I got inventive. Begin with the financial support system. Brianna's automobile lease was in her name, but I had been making the payments for the past year because she said money was tight. I called the lease business and informed that I was no longer making payments on her behalf, effective immediately. They stated that they would contact the primary leaser regarding payment arrangements. The phone came next. She was on my family plan, which saved her approximately $60 per month. I called the carrier and said that I needed to remove a line from my account. They indicated it would take effect at the end of the current billing cycle, in 3 days. Car insurance came next. She was listed as a driver on my policy, but her automobile was not protected. She has her own protocol for this. I immediately removed her as an approved driver from my insurance. Next came the credit cards. She had added user cards to 2 of my accounts for emergencies and convenience. Call both banks, withdraw her authorization, and cancel the physical cards. They stated that the cards would stop operating after 24 hours. Gym membership. The same story. She utilized my family membership package. I called and terminated her access immediately. The apartment was difficult because she had tenant rights. I couldn't change the locks or remove her belongings without a proper legal process, but I could begin planning. Went to a storage facility, hired a unit for 6 months, and paid in advance. Then I got down and wrote her a letter informing her that our relationship was finished, that I would no longer be funding any aspect of her lifestyle, and that she had 30 days to make other living arrangements, as required by law. Professional, courteous, and legally acceptable. She left the letter on the kitchen counter, where she would find it when she returned home from wherever she had gone after the bar. Update 2. Brianna arrived home around 7 p.m. on Sunday, still wearing her outfit from the night before and looking slightly hungover. I was sitting in the living room reading. When she walked in, she noticed the note, took it up and read it. Her face changed into roughly 5 different expressions: confusion, fury, disbelief, panic, then back to anger. "Albert, what's this?" she screamed, waving the letter. "It's a 30-day notice to vacate," I explained calmly. "Also, notice that I'm no longer covering any of your expenses, effective immediately. You can't be serious." "Dead serious, Brianna. You told me to step my game up last night, so I did some evaluation. Turns out I was subsidizing someone who gives her number to random men and tells me I'm not good enough." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "That's exactly what you meant, Brianna. You made it clear other men are more interesting than me. So go be irresistible on someone else's dime." She used her credit card to purchase meal delivery an hour later. Declined. I tried the second option. The same result. That's when the first round of frantic calls began. "Albert, my cards aren't working," she stated as I responded. "That's correct, Brianna. You're no longer an authorized user on my accounts." "How am I supposed to eat? How am I supposed to function?" "The same way adults function, Brianna. Use your own money, your own cards, your own resources." She hung up and tried ringing back immediately. I forwarded it to voicemail. Update 3. 2 days later. Monday morning was when reality set in. Brianna's automobile payment was due, and the leasing firm called her immediately to inquire about payment options. She approached me in a hurry. "Albert, they're saying if I don't make the payment by Wednesday, they'll start repossession proceedings." "Sounds like you should make the payment then, Brianna." "With what money? You know I don't have that kind of cash saved up." "That's a budgeting problem, Brianna, not a me problem. You've been paying it for a year. You can't just stop." "Actually I can, Brianna. Watch me." She spent Monday frantically calling people, attempting to borrow money. Chloe apparently provided her enough money to fulfill the car payment, but made it obvious that it was a one-time transaction. Tuesday, her phone service was suspended. She tried to call me from Chloe's phone. "Albert, my phone doesn't work," she stated. "That's because you're no longer on my plan, Brianna. You'll need to get your own service." "How am I supposed to get my own service without money?" "Figure it out, Brianna. You're irresistible, remember? Maybe one of your admirers can help." Wednesday, she took a different strategy. I arrived at my office during lunchtime. Security called and said there was a woman in the lobby seeking to see me. I went downstairs and saw Brianna looking worried and desperate. "Albert, please," she pleaded. "I can't afford all this stuff on my own. You know that." "Then you shouldn't have told me to step my game up, Brianna. This is what stepping my game up looks like." "I'm sorry about Saturday night. I was drunk. I was being stupid." "You were being honest, Brianna. For the first time in our relationship, you told me exactly what you thought of me." "That's not true. You told me other men find you irresistible, and I should step my game up." Mission accomplished. I walked back to my office, leaving her standing in the lobby. Update 4. A week after. Brianna was staying with Chloe at the end of the first week, depleting her savings in order to sustain her lifestyle. The cancellation of her gym membership affected her hard. She had been going there every day, mainly to see and be seen. Chloe called me Thursday night, clearly frustrated. "Albert, this is getting ridiculous. Brianna is driving me crazy. She won't look for her own place, just keep talking about how to fix things with you." "There's nothing to fix, Chloe. She told me exactly what she thought of me Saturday night. She made one stupid comment. Albert, you're destroying her entire life over it." "I'm not destroying anything, Chloe. I'm just no longer subsidizing it. There's a difference." "You're being vindictive." "I'm being logical, Chloe. Why would I financially support someone who thinks other men are more irresistible than me?" Brianna attempted to enter the apartment building on Friday but was turned away by the front desk. They contacted and stated someone had requested admission, claiming to live there. "She's not on the lease," I informed them. "She's a guest who's been staying here but she's moving out. Don't let her up without my explicit permission." The weekend passed quietly, but Monday brought a new degree of desperation. Brianna's mother, Diane, contacted me immediately. "Albert," she added, "this is getting out of hand. Brianna is falling apart. You need to work this out. Diane, with respect. Your daughter told me other men find her irresistible and I should step my game up. I stepped my game up by stepping away. She made a mistake, Albert. Everyone makes mistakes. Some mistakes have bigger consequences than others, Diane. This is one of them. You're being cruel. I'm being consistent, Diane. I don't subsidize people who give their numbers to random men. Update 5. 2 weeks later. Brianna's 30-day notice period was half done, and she had yet to make any significant progress toward finding her own house. She was bouncing between Chloe's couch and a few other friends, but she was overstaying her welcome everywhere. She tried one last desperate ruse. She arrived at the apartment complex with a locksmith, stating she had lost her key and needed to get in. Smart Building Management contacted me initially. Sir, there's a woman here with a locksmith saying she needs access to your apartment. Don't let them in, I instructed. She doesn't live here anymore, and I haven't authorized any locksmith services. The locksmith supposedly told Brianna that he couldn't work without the property owner's permission and left. She called me right away, screaming, Albert, that was my stuff in there, I have a right to it. You have a right to collect your belongings during reasonable hours with advance notice, Brianna. You don't have a right to bring locksmiths to my apartment. I need my things now. Send me a text with a date and time that works for you, Brianna. I'll be present while you collect your belongings, and then you can move on with your irresistible life. She hung up but texted me an hour later, asking if I might come by Wednesday evening. I agreed. Wednesday, she arrived with Chloe and a little moving truck. It took them 3 hours to pack her belongings. I kept an eye out to see that nothing of mine went missing, but otherwise I stayed out of their way. Brianna stood in the empty bedroom, stunned that it was actually occurring. Albert, she spoke quietly. This doesn't have to be the end. We can work through this. You told me to step my game up, Brianna. This is what that looks like. Find someone who thinks you're worth competing for. Chloe drove away with Brianna and all her belongings. I changed the locks that night, just to be safe. 1 month later, this is the final update. It's been a month since I upped my game, and the results have been phenomenal. Not only in my life, but also in Brianna's perception of how the world actually works. She found a studio apartment across town, but she needed her parents to co-sign because her credit wasn't good enough on its own. I heard from Chloe that she's working extra hours to offset all the bills she didn't understand I was covering. Car payments, phone bills, insurance, gym memberships and streaming services all pile up when you pay for them yourself. It turns out that being appealing does not cover the cost of living. She attempted to contact her a few times through mutual acquaintances, always sending messages about how sorry she was, how she'd learned her lesson, and how she wanted another opportunity. My response was usually the same. She received everything she asked for. The lovely irony is that Saturday night's comment was intended to push me to work harder, compete for her attention, and demonstrate my worth to her. Instead, it inspired me to recognize my worth and cease subsidizing someone who did not value it. Chloe stopped attempting to mediate after understanding Brianna wasn't looking for solutions, but rather someone to solve her problems for her. Even her closest friends grew tired of her incessant moaning about how pricey everything was. Last week I noticed her at the grocery store, using coupons, looking worried, and counting goods in her cart. She noticed me and waved tentatively. I nodded nicely and continued shopping. There was no drama, simply two people who had previously known each other. By the way, the guy from Saturday night did not phone her. Chloe claimed that he was married and was only gathering numbers for enjoyment. Brianna sat by her phone for days awaiting a text that never arrived, while I was busy upping my game by withdrawing financial assistance from someone who believed I wasn't good enough. She wanted me to compete harder, battle for her attention, and show how tempting she was. Instead, she discovered that some men do not compete. They simply walk away, leaving individuals to work out their own lives. The lesson here is simple. When someone encourages you to elevate your game, take them seriously. Stepping up your game may require you to distance yourself from people who do not value what you bring to their lives. Brianna is currently learning to be seductive on her own budget. Meanwhile, I raise my game in ways she never expected, by refusing to fund someone who believed other men were more intriguing than me. Sometimes the best retribution is simply ceasing what you were doing out of goodwill and allowing others to manage their own obligations. My parents cut me out of their will after I paid their bills for 3 years, so I canceled every payment and went on a trip to Thailand instead. They called me the responsible one while I paid their bills. Then I found the will and realized I didn't even exist in their future. I, a 34-year-old woman, come from what I believed was a fairly close-knit family, middle-class suburbia, the entire American dream package deal. My parents are in their early 60s, my brother Jacob is 36. And then there's Jessica. We are not the Hallmark movie kind, where everyone hugs and expresses their emotions. We're more the type that communicates through passive-aggressive comments about one another's life choices over dry turkey on Thanksgiving. But I've always assumed we had each other's backs when it counted. To put things in perspective, I've always been the responsible one. I had good grades, attended a state college, and secured a steady career in pharmaceutical research. It doesn't get me invited to expensive cocktail parties, but I pay my bills and have my life in order. Jacob, on the other hand, has always been the ideal child. He attended a more prestigious college, which my parents helped pay for, whereas I took out debts that I'll most likely still be paying off when I'm in adult diapers. He earned an MBA and now works at a software startup where he makes a nice living, but he still manages to be too busy whenever my parents require practical assistance. It's interesting how being busy forces you to be choosy. Growing up, our duties were rather well defined. Jacob was the star, and his football games and debate tournaments required family outings. Meanwhile, I once won a statewide scientific competition, but my parents missed it because Dad had a golf game and Mom had a hair appointment. When I arrived home with my trophy, Mom simply responded, "That's nice, honey. Did you remember to defrost the chicken for dinner?" Cool, but I wasn't bitter. Okay, perhaps a little bitter, like lemon peel that has been left in the sun for a week. But I handled it. I assumed that was just how families worked. Someone gets to be the star, and someone else gets to be whatever I was, the supporting role, the sidekick, or the chicken defrosting champion. I moved out at 18 for college, worked 2 jobs while taking full-time classes, and finished with honors. My graduation party was at Denny's, breakfast, and my father spent the majority of the time talking about Jacob's new condo in Chicago. Jacob wasn't present, he was networking in Cabo. Apparently tequila shots and sunburn are important job development tools. Who knew? After college, I worked at a pharmaceutical research company, starting at the bottom and working my way up to senior researcher. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. Good benefits, a 401k, and the usual boring adult package. I bought a little condo, acquired a cat named Professor Nibbles, I was high when I signed the adoption papers, and settled into a peaceful but fulfilling life. Jacob, meanwhile, hopped between sexy-sounding roles at firms like Blascor and Nexify, which appear to specialize in producing branded hoodies and press releases about disrupting industries that didn't need to be disrupted. He lived in high-end downtown apartments, dated Instagram models, and always appeared to be on the verge of success. By the way, what about the big making? It never really happened. But my parents were persuaded that it was just around the corner. So this is when things get crazy. My father experienced a health scare about 3 years ago. It was nothing serious in the end, but it was enough to land him in the hospital for a few days. Mom was a mess, so I took time off work to handle everything. Hospital paperwork, insurance calls, bringing Mom food that wasn't radioactive cafeteria muck, walking their dog, and so on. Jacob sent flowers and called once, because nothing screams "I care" like a $50 bouquet and a 3-minute phone call while you're most likely taking a poo. During that hospital stay, I remember sitting in Dad's room while he slept. Mom had gone home to shower, so I was catching up on work emails. Dad awoke after midnight, bewildered. "Jessica," he said, "where's Jacob?" "He's in Boston, Dad, for work, remember? He called earlier." Dad nodded slowly. "He's doing so well, isn't he? Such a good son." I simply smiled and helped him take a sip of water. Whatever. Dad was taking pain medication. I was not going to get into it. After Dad recovered, they began talking a lot about getting their affairs in order and ensuring that everything was correctly set up. I didn't think much about it. It appeared sensible following a health scare. Then I started noticing small details. Dad requested me to assist set up automatic payments for their bills because technology is confusing. This from a man who worked as an electrical engineer for 30 years but suddenly forgot how buttons operate. Mom called to ask if I could help with their property taxes because they were a little short this year. The requests became increasingly frequent. Cable bill, water bill, new roof, plumber. Every time it was just temporary, or just this once. But it eventually became my normal position. I was essentially financing their lifestyle while working full-time and saving for my own future. You know, the future when I can retire before I'm 97 and possibly afford both rent and avocado toast in the same month. When they first begged for financial assistance, I was really concerned. My parents had always been financially responsible. Dad's engineering career had been well compensated. and Mom's part-time work as a school secretary had provided a decent second income. They owned their home outright and were saving for retirement. What has changed? We're just in a bit of a tight spot, Mom responded vaguely when I questioned. Investments, the market. I did not push it. Perhaps they had made some questionable investing decisions. Perhaps their retirement assets had taken a hit. This happens. They'd also helped me out when I needed it, such as when my car broke down in college and I couldn't afford the repairs. They sent me $800 with no questions asked. It was my turn to help them out, except, it didn't stop. The requests began tiny. $200 here for an unexpectedly high power bill, $350 there for car repairs, but quickly increased. Property taxes, insurance payments, a new water heater, new windows, and a kitchen remodel that evolved from, we're just updating the countertops, to, we need all new appliances and custom cabinets. Meanwhile, Jacob would come in for holidays, bringing lavish gifts and spinning stories about his business adventures, and my parents would gobble it up. Jacob is doing so wonderfully. Jacob recently received a promotion. Jacob is considering purchasing a vacation property. Yeah, it's easy when you're not spending $800 every month on someone else's bills. It's amazing how much disposable income you have when you're not depositing it into your parents' bank accounts. I tried to keep track of how much I was feeding them, but it just got away from me. Between the automatic payments I'd set up and the random emergency demands, I was probably handing them $1,000 to $1,500 every month. That isn't pocket change. That is a mortgage payment. That is a nice automobile. That is a yearly vacation to a place that requires a passport and does not have bed bugs. But every time I began to question it, to wonder if I should be saving that money for myself instead, the guilt set in. They were my parents. They had nurtured, fed, clothed, and cared for me when I was unwell. How could I not assist them when they needed it? So I kept paying, helping, and being the responsible party. I reduced my personal spending by canceling my gym membership, switching from the expensive salon to great clips for haircuts, and meal prepping pitiful little containers of rice and chicken instead of going out to lunch. I told myself it was only temporary, until they got back on their feet. At first, I didn't mind helping out. They're my parents, But something about the circumstance felt odd, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Like when you walk into a room and forget why you're there. Except that the room is your family dynamic, and what you forgot is your self-esteem. Then, around 6 months ago, my mother texted me, inviting me to a Zoom meeting on family financial planning that weekend. I hoped that they would eventually acknowledge all of my assistance and devise a fair system. Perhaps some sort of, thanks for keeping our lights on for the past 3 years, you're the best daughter ever, acceptance speech. A girl can dream. I arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in a good blouse and combed hair, and appeared to be a responsible adult who did not eat cereal for dinner standing over the sink. Mom and Dad joined next. Jacob came in last, looking like he had just stepped out of a J. Crew catalog. Neatly ironed button-downs, artistically tousled hair, the kind of casual expense that costs a lot of money and time to create. "Hey everyone," he said, flashing that white striped smile. "Let me just share my screen." Jacob actually ran the entire presentation, sharing his screen with PowerPoint slides about estate planning and wealth management. My parents simply nodded along as he discussed their home, investments, and retirement funds. Jacob had seemingly landed a side employment as a financial advisor infomercial host, based on his delivery. "As you can see," Jacob explained, referring to a pie chart that made about as much sense to me as quantum physics, "we can restructure the portfolio to maximize growth, while providing necessary liquidity for current expenses." Mom and Dad were nodding like the bobblehead dogs that people place in their vehicle windows. They didn't understand what he was saying. I could tell since I've noticed the same nodding when I try to explain my study to them. They're sporting the, we're pretending to follow, but actually thinking about what's for dinner facial expressions. The strangest part was that my name was not mentioned once during the entire call. Not once. I sat there on mute, seeing my own face fade into the corner of the screen as they talked about the future as if I didn't exist. I was the digital equivalent of a houseplant during the meeting. Actually, no. Houseplants are watered and acknowledged on occasion. Slide after slide of financial jargon, estimates, figures, and recommendations. Nobody said, "And of course we need to factor in all the support Jessica has been providing." No one said, "We should probably stop relying on Jessica's income." I was invisible, a ghost, the financial equivalent of a Victorian child, expected to provide but never speak. Until the very end, when Mom abruptly added, "Oh, and Jessica, the property tax bill is coming up again. We're counting on you for that, sweetheart. You've always been so reliable." That was my role. The reliable one. The person who pays bills. The human ATM. Jessica is making family finances happen, but without the benefit of a commercial break. I unmuted just long enough to respond. Sure, Mom. Then excused myself with a work call and checked out before anyone could see the tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. Following the call, I felt hollow. Something was not adding up. Jacob had never assisted them with their finances before, so why was he suddenly so involved? Why did they plan everything around him? And why did they still expect me to pay their bills? It's as if they were throwing a party for which I paid but was not invited to attend. I began paying closer attention, watching and listening. That's when I started noticing weirder stuff. Jacob is receiving mortgage-related mail at their home. Dad mentioned casually that Jacob had taken him to meet with their financial consultant. Mom asked me to help her download an app that would allow Jacob to see their bank accounts, simply to keep an eye on things. Because it appears that having two people with access to your accounts is preferable to having one. One Sunday I dropped by their house unannounced with some handmade cookies because I'm still a nice daughter, dang it, even when I'm skeptical. They were gone, but Jacob's car was in the driveway. I opened the door with my key and called out as I entered. No response. I moved towards the kitchen and heard Jacob's voice coming from Dad's home office. He was on the phone. Just need to finalize the transfer, he said. Once the house is in the trust, we can... He paused when he noticed me in the doorway. Got to go, he hastily whispered into the phone before hanging up. Hey sis, he remarked casually, as if I hadn't just overheard him discussing the transfer of my parents' house. What's up? I lifted the jar and added, just bring some cookies. What are you doing here? Just helping Dad organize some paperwork. He pointed vaguely at the desk, which was covered with folders and records. Boring stuff? What kind of boring stuff? You know, financial stuff, estate planning, nothing interesting. I nodded slowly. Need any help? I'm pretty good with organizing. He shook his head hurriedly. Too quick. Nah. I got it. Dad and I have a system going. A system that apparently excluded me. I began to feel as if I were in some strange gaslighty thriller film, where everyone else knows something. You don't. The sixth sense. Except instead of seeing dead people, I was the only one who didn't realize I was being played. Then, 2 months ago, I discovered it. I was assisting Mom hunt for a receipt in her home office when I noticed a folder called Will Final 2023. I realize I shouldn't have looked, but wouldn't you? If you're thinking, no, I wouldn't, congratulations on your moral superiority. But you're also lying. I waited until Mom went to answer the phone before pulling the folder out. My hands were very shaking. I felt like a child sneaking a glimpse at Christmas presents. However, instead of hoping for a PlayStation, I hoped I hadn't been utterly removed from my parents' lives. Inside was their amended will, which had been completed and notarized only 3 months before. And guess what? Everything was going to Jacob. The house, the money, Dad's vintage record collection, Mom's jewelry. All of it. Even the dang dog. There was also a letter explaining their decision. Jacob has exhibited financial savvy and accountability. We believe he is best suited to administer our estate and legacy. Not a word about me. Not a single word. No explanation for why I received nothing. Not even a sentimental object or family photo book. I didn't even receive the participation award for inheriting. Apparently, my 3-year financial support subscription did not include legacy access. I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. The room truly spun for a second. I had to sit down, the paper crumpled in my trembling palms. This couldn't be correct. There had to be an error. Perhaps another document. Another will. Something that explained why I had been entirely wiped. But there wasn't. Page after page explaining how Jacob would get everything. How he would handle the estate, and how he would carry on their legacy, while I presumably would receive nothing beyond the satisfaction of knowing I had helped pay their retirement while being written out of their existence. I returned everything precisely how I found it, without saying a word. But within, I was screaming. All the bills I'd been paying. All those times I'd turned up when they needed assistance. I skipped all of my trips because I was sending them money instead, and this is how they saw me, as nothing. I could have set myself on fire to keep them warm, but they'd complain about the smoke damage. I drove home in a trance, unsure what to do. Confront them? Demand an explanation? Beg for inclusion? Write a letter that is firmly written? Hire a skywriter to spell what the fudge over their house? That night, I was unable to sleep. I continued running over the last 3 years in my brain. All the checks I'd written, all the automated payments I'd set up, and all the times I'd reached into my money to assist them. And for what? To be erased? To be nothing. I brought out my bank statements and began totaling up the payments. Over 3 years, I had given them more than $40,000. $40,000. That's a down payment for a house. That is a master's degree. That's a tremendously fantastic car. Or a rather mediocre boat. And they didn't even bother leaving me a coffee mug in their will. I chose to wait. To watch. To see if they'd ever tell me, and whether they believed I deserved to know. And that's when I made a decision that could get me in trouble. I did not tell them what I know, I did not challenge them, I just quit. I stopped answering when they called about invoices, stopped sending money. They stopped relying on me for support. I stopped putting myself on fire to keep others warm who weren't even thankful for the heat. I promised myself I would give them 3 months. 3 months to either come clean or prove to me that I was worth more than my money. 3 months to see whether they'd realize I was backing away. To my amazement, they did not. Instead, the requests simply became more demanding, entitled, and needy, the financial equivalent of a kid throwing a tantrum in the candy aisle. Jessica, your electricity bill is past due. When will you send the money? Jessica, we need the property taxes paid by Friday. Jessica, have you forgotten about the cable bill? Your dad is missing his shows. No one asked if I was okay, if anything had happened, or if I needed assistance with a change. They were so far up their own asses that they could see their tonsils. And Jacob? The radio is silent. Apparently the family financial manager was not concerned with day-to-day expenses. It's surprising that financial knowledge does not extend to actually paying for items. Around a month into my financial strike, I went to their place for dinner. Mom had called and expressly requested that I come over. We need to talk about something, she said, which typically means we need you to write a check for something. I didn't want to go, but I went regardless because obviously I am a masochist. Perhaps I was still hoping that they would notice that something was incorrect, that they'd inquire whether I was all right, that they'd acknowledge me as a person with feelings, rather than just a handy ATM with legs. Dinner was as typical, with conversations dominated by Jacob's newest accomplishments, even if he wasn't present. Dad mentioned Jacob's interest in investing in a new technology startup. Mom added that Jacob had sent them a gift basket from an expensive place I couldn't afford to buy at. Then, as I was helping to clear the dishes, Mom exclaimed, "Oh Jessica, the property tax bill arrived yesterday. It's $3,200 this year. Can you take care of it by Friday?" Just like that. No please. There was no acknowledgement that she was asking me for $3,000. There was no recognition that I had been ignoring their payment solicitations for several weeks, just the assumption that I would pay. And that is what I did. That was my role. The accountable one. The wallet. "I can't this month," I responded, keeping my tone neutral as I rinsed a plate. Mom froze, sponge in hand. "What are you saying you can't?" "I actually can't. I'm facing some money problems of my own. This is not a lie. My financial dilemma was that I had been losing money to them for years. But this is crucial, Jessica. It's a property tax. If we do not pay, we will face penalties." I shrugged. "I'm confident Jacob can help. He's doing so well, with his financial knowledge and everything." Mom's expression became convoluted, as if she were attempting to answer a tough math problem. "Jacob? But he doesn't. We don't ask Jacob for money." "Why not?" "Because he is busy. He has his own expenses and life." "So I don't?" Mom looked perplexed, as if I had suddenly begun speaking Klingon. "That is different. You're the responsible one. Does that mean I'm also responsible for your bills? We've also assisted you, you know. Do you remember when you needed money for car maintenance in college? We sent it right away. No questions asked." I had to giggle about that. "Mom, it was $800. Like 15 years ago. I have given you tens of thousands of cash since then." "It's not the same thing." Mom's expression tightened. "I didn't realize you were keeping score. And that was all. The moment I knew, nothing will change." They saw no difficulty with the arrangement. They didn't understand why I was backing off. In their minds, this was exactly the way things should be. I pay. They take. Jacob finally gets everything. The circle of financial dysfunction. I dried my hands with a dish towel and grabbed my purse. I should go. "But what about property taxes?" Mom called after me as I approached the door. I only turned back long enough to reply, "Not my problem." I walked out. Then, 3 weeks ago, Mom called and invited me to join them for lunch. "We need to talk about something important," she told me. My heart actually skipped. Was that it? Would they tell me about the will? Apologize? Maybe you could donate me a kidney. At this time, I would have accepted any organ recognition. I arrived at the restaurant early, feeling worried but excited. They arrived 20 minutes late, with Jacob in tow. We ordered, then spoke about the weather and Mom's garden. Then, when our lunch arrived, Mom cleared her throat and remarked, "Jessica dear, we wanted to speak with you about the bills. We have seen that you have not been keeping up with things lately." I waited. Surely this was the prelude to the actual conversation. "We apologize for treating you like an unpaid utility service." Dad jumped in. "We recognize that everyone goes through tough circumstances. If you were suffering financial issues, you should have told us. We are family." I almost choked on my water. They were discussing financial concerns with me, despite the fact that I had been supporting their lifestyle for years. The irony was thick enough to ice a cake. But I maintained my calm. "I'm doing well, actually. I'm just reassessing my budget." Translation: moving monies from the bank of enabling you to the republic of taking care of myself for once. Mom seemed relieved. "Okay, good. So you'll pay the electricity bill this week? It's been 2 months, and they're threatening to disconnect my service." Jacob, who had hitherto been silent, added, "It's critical to stay on top of these issues, Lee. Financial responsibility is critical." I stared at him. Then I looked at my parents. Were they for real? Was this really happening? Did I have an aneurysm? Was I pranked? Where were the concealed cameras? Jacob continued, warming up to his topic. "I've been looking at Mom and Dad's whole financial situation, and I'm concerned. Their retirement planning requires careful thought. That is why I have been stepping in to assist and manage things." "Manage things?" I repeated. "Do they like paying their bills?" He had the grace to appear slightly uncomfortable. "Well, no, not the daily expenses. It's more about the big picture, like investing and estate planning." "The future," I repeated, and that's when Mom dropped the bomb, casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. "Oh, and while we have you both here, we recently updated our will. Jacob will handle everything once the time comes. With his financial expertise, he is simply more suited to the task. We know you understand, Jessica. You've always been very practical." They'd planned it. I waited until a public spot. I brought Jacob as a backup. They never meant to apologize or explain. This lunch was not to be clean. It was to ensure that I continued to pay their bills, even though they had cut me out of their future plans. It was a response to my sudden surge of financial self-esteem. I sat there, fork halfway in my mouth, as the entire realization poured over me. I wasn't family. I was a utility, a service, a means to an objective. I was not a daughter. I was walking, discussing direct deposit. I lowered my fork carefully, took a sip of water, and set a 20 on the table for my dinner. "I think I should go," I murmured gently. "But you've barely touched your food," Mom insisted. I simply gazed at her. I really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. "I'm not hungry anymore. Not for food. Not for the emotional scraps they were tossing my way." As I stood to leave, Dad yelled after me. "So, about that electric bill?" I turned back just long enough to say, "I'm sure Jacob can handle it. He's better positioned for that kind of thing." Throwing their remarks back at them felt great, like returning a decade's worth of Christmas fruitcakes at once. I walked out. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not send angry text messages or make theatrical phone calls. I just walked home, sat down at my computer, and carefully withdrew myself from their financial lives with the accuracy of a surgeon removing a tumor. I canceled every automatic payment I had set up. I closed all joint accounts. I contacted every utility company and deleted my name as an approved payer. I emailed their HOA to inform them that I would no longer be paying the dues. I even contacted their lawn service to discontinue the monthly maintenance that I had been paying for. I checked every T, dotted every I, and severed every financial cord with the same care as someone closing their tabs after a night of drinking. Except that I was finally sobering up. The delight I felt with each cancellation, removal, and deletion was alarming. To be honest, it felt too good. Like I was finally regaining control of something that had gotten away from me. Each click, call, and confirmation email added another brick to the wall I was constructing between myself and their financial exploitation. Then I blocked their numbers. Not permanently, but just for a week. I needed time to ponder without the guilt trips and demands. Like a financial cleanse. For a week I felt odd. Lighter in some aspects, yet heavier in others. I expected to feel guilty, but instead I felt sad. It's unfortunate that the family I believed I had didn't exist. I was sad that I had wasted so many years attempting to earn affection that should have been unconditional. You should not have to pay for your seat at the family table. When I unblocked their numbers, the texts poured in. Confused at first, then concerned, then angry. But not worried about me. Concerned about bills, payments, and services. My favorite was Dad's. The internet is down. How should I watch my YouTube videos? I do not know, Dad. Maybe rub 2 sticks together to see if Netflix comes. I did not respond to any of them. What was there to say? Sorry, your human ATM developed a spine. 2 weeks have gone by. Then 3. I concentrated on myself for once. I started looking at my personal money and was astonished to find how much I'd been giving out all these years. Thousands. Most likely tens of thousands. In certain areas, enough money has accumulated over time to purchase a tiny house. If boomers are correct about millennial purchasing tendencies, that equates to around 8,000 avocado toasts. I started therapy. I started spending money on myself without remorse. I joined a gym. I scheduled a hair appointment at a salon that didn't clip pets' fur. I bought new sheets with a thread count that didn't make it feel like I was sleeping on sandpaper. After years of sacrificing pennies to make my parents' lives comfortable, these small luxuries felt gigantic. The calls and texts kept pouring, becoming more urgent. Mom went from angry to guilty. I'm not sure why you're doing this to us after all we've done for you. Dad was more forthright. You need to start paying these bills again. This is unacceptable behavior. Then yesterday I received the text I had been waiting for. From my mother. The electricity is out. Did you forget to pay? Number, I miss you? Number, can we speak? Number. There is no acknowledgement of what transpired during lunch. Just the presumption that I would continue to pay. Keep repairing. Keep being the ATM. She could as well have texted, money please. Like Mona Lisa from Parks and Recreation. I glanced at the message for a long time before typing back. No, I remembered exactly what you said. Then I switched off my phone and went to bed. I slept like a baby actually. The kind of sleep you get after putting down a backpack full of rocks that you've been hauling uphill for years. I awoke this morning to 37 missed calls and a voicemail from my father, who was ranting about responsibility and family obligation. But here's the part where I might become the evil guy. I knew they didn't have enough money to pay the electricity bill. I knew their power would be cut off if I didn't intervene. And I did nothing. In fact, I traveled to their area around the time I realized the power company would be there to disconnect electricity. Parked across the street. I watched as the utility van pulled up. I watched as the worker got out, walked to the meter, and performed whatever they needed to do to turn off the power. I watched the lights in my parents' house go out. I sat there, sipping my coffee and feeling nothing. There is no guilt. There's no sadness. Just a serene assurance that this was the logical outcome of their decisions. They had used me. They took me for granted. And now they were learning what life was like without their own ATM. My parents stepped outdoors, both on their phones. I could see them pointing, most likely leaving me more panicked voicemails. Dad paced the driveway. Mom sat on the porch steps, head in hands. I should have felt something. Right? Guilt? Remorse? The overpowering desire to get in and fix everything. But I only felt relief. I was relieved that I was no longer responsible. I was relieved that I wouldn't have to keep putting myself on fire to keep them warm. Maybe they are right. Maybe I'm the terrible guy for leaving them in the dark, rather than simply paying the bill one more time. Perhaps I should have tackled them directly, rather than giving them this silent treatment. After years of being responsible, reliable, and a fixer, I am exhausted. I'm just really exhausted. There's only so many times you can be the family doormat before you realize you're being stepped on. Yes. After 2 weeks, their power was eventually restored. Jacob eventually stepped up and paid the amount after 3 days. 3 days passed before Mr. Financial Acumen chose to handle a simple utility payment. I guess his PowerPoint talents aren't applicable to paying utility bills. Who knew? The 3 days were interesting. I received hourly calls and texts, each more urgent than the last. Dad threatened to contact the police and denounce me for elder abuse. Mom alternated between guilt trips. I can't believe you'd let your own folks suffer. And manipulation. We'll have to sell our jewels to pay expenses. Jacob alternated between angry emails accusing me of being heartless and desperate messages asking me to simply pay the bill one more time and we'd figure it out. I did not respond to any of them. I kept reminding myself of my willpower. Of being written out of existence but still expected to support their lifestyle. Years of being taken for granted. It was like a mantra, keeping me going when my resolve began to waver. On day 3, the calls ceased, the texts stopped. They all maintained radio silence. I was frightened enough to drive past their residence that evening. The lights came back on. Jacob's automobile was in the driveway. I later learned that he had finally stepped up and paid the electricity bill. Then I spent the evening explaining to my parents that perhaps they shouldn't have relied on me for money all these years while preparing to leave everything to him. Apparently, there was a lot of yelling, crying, denial, and justification. But Jessica never seemed to mind. Second, I received a handwritten letter from my mother yesterday. Not an email or text, but an actual letter, demonstrating how serious this is because my mother despises writing anything by hand. I believe mother complained about hand cramps the last time she wrote something by hand, which was most likely my birth certificate. The letter was more of a confused attempt to explain what happened than an apology. She responded that they'd always considered me as the strong one, and had no intention of taking advantage. She claimed they didn't inform me about the will, because they didn't want to upset me and assumed I wouldn't be concerned with material things, as if being written out of existence is somehow a tribute to my spiritual character. Thank you, Mom. I will pay my rent with enlightenment. The true bomb was the final paragraph. We always relied on you since you were the only person we could trust. Jacob could appear wonderful on paper, but you were our rock. So I was trustworthy enough to pay their expenses, but not with their legacy. Nice. I'm dependable enough to pay for their retirement, but not enough to inherit the spoils of it. Make sure it makes sense. I have not yet responded. I'm still deciding what to say, or whether to say anything at all. I'm currently divided between writing K on a blank sheet of paper and sending a bill for all the money I've spent over the years, with interest. Oh, and Jacob called me too. Take this. He claimed he had no idea how much I had been paying. He assumed I was only assisting with odd bills, not practically subsidizing their entire existence. When I told him how much I'd been providing them monthly, $1,350 on average, he stopped talking for the first time in his life. Have you been paying that much each month? He finally inquired. For 3 years? I replied, while you were busy creating PowerPoint presentations about their estate that I would not be able to participate in? He had the decency to sound embarrassed. I knew you helped them out occasionally, but not like this. They told me it was simply minor details. Well, now you know, I replied. And now it's your turn. He remained mute. So where are things now? I'm still not sending money. I'm still analyzing my feelings about everything. And I'm still figuring out what type of relationship I want to have with my family in the future, if any. Right now, I'm going towards a Christmas card from a different state level of communication. But I know one thing for certain. I never regret standing up for myself. Not for 1 second. It turns out that my spine functions perfectly once I decide to use it. Thank you for the validation. Strangers on the internet might sometimes help you realize you're not insane for wanting basic decency and respect from your own family. The bar was so low that it was nearly a trip hazard in hell. They still found a way to limbo beneath it. P.S. For those who are curious about therapy, yes, I have begun talking to someone. The first session was yesterday. My therapist's eye twitched only 3 times during my story, which I consider a success. P.P.S. To the person who suggested I spend the money I'm saving to go on a fantasy vacation instead, I've already bought tickets to Thailand for next month. This is the first huge thing I've ever done for myself. Going to get one of those shirts that say, "My parents wrote me out of their will, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, emotional trauma, and a trip to Thailand." My family cut me from my sister's engagement, so I planned a secret wedding and left them off the guest list. Now they're begging to be let in. My name is Noah. I'm 28. And if you met me, you'd probably say I'm the calmest person in any group. I've never been the noisy sister, the one who demands attention at the table or interrupts conversations to make them about me. That job was always filled by my younger sister Ava, who was 2 years younger, unbelievably boisterous, and yet the center of my parents' existence. Growing up, I learned to be silent. When Ava shouted and wept because she got the blue plate instead of the pink one, Mom would replace mine without asking. When she forgot her homework or had a lousy grade, Dad would say, "She's just got a creative mind." If I came home with straight A's, it was, "That's what we expect from you, Noah." It was modest at first, but minor things made me feel like a supporting actor in my own life. But over time, those minor grievances accumulated into a mountain of hidden bitterness that I never let others see. Not till lately. Ava got engaged to Ryan last year, generic finance bro, the kind who claims to have created brunch. We were not close. He once confused me for a waiter at a cousin's wedding. I let it go. Ava adored him. Despite my desire to roll my eyes, I kept my mouth silent. I even applauded her when she announced it at Christmas, despite the fact that she did so as I was informing everyone about a recent promotion I had received. She cut me off midway through. "Sorry, but this can't wait," she exclaimed, flashing the ring around. Mom screamed. Dad shed tears. My news was forgotten within 10 seconds. That night I returned home with a knot in my stomach and a phony smile still on my face. I hoped that they would invite me to help prepare or attend the engagement party. However, the next few weeks passed in silence. No texts, calls, or invitations. I assumed they were simply delayed in their planning. Then I saw images on Facebook of my sister standing in the center of a hired garden spot, holding champagne and surrounded by family. My family. My parents, my cousins, and even my Aunt Nadine, who lives 3 hours away and always claims to be too weary to attend events. Everyone was present. Everyone but me. I waited a full day to call my mother. I needed time to cool down and avoid sounding irritated. She answered the second ring cheerfully and breathlessly, as if she had just stopped laughing. "Noah, everything okay?" "I saw the pictures," I replied. Even I realized my voice sounded hollow. "Oh," she replied. Then came quiet. "You didn't invite me." There was a pause, after which her voice toughened somewhat. "Well, I didn't think you'd want to come. You've always had this thing when it comes to Ava. It's her moment, Noah. We just didn't want drama." My ears ringing. Drama? What drama have I ever created? "You know what I mean," she remarked casually, as if brushing away a bug. "You always seem to sulk around these things. You've never liked being outshined. And Ava deserves a peaceful celebration." I could not even form words. My brain was still processing the fact that my own mother expected me to be envious that I would ruin my sister's engagement celebration simply by arriving up. So I said the first thing that came to mind, the only thing I could say without my voice trembling. "Then you won't mind missing my wedding too?" There was a pause, the longest one I had ever heard from her. Then she laughed. Not loud or nasty, just a dry, awkward chuckle, as if she didn't know what more to say. "Noah, don't be ridiculous." "I'm not," I said calmly. "Have a nice evening." I hung up. And for the first time in my adult life, I did not feel like the silent, overlooked sibling. I felt angry and concentrated. I'd been discreetly dating someone for almost 2 years. Her name is Lena. She's bright, caring, and the only person who has never made me feel as if I had to compete for attention. We'd already discussed marriage. I hadn't proposed yet, but I had planned to do so privately and without a large audience. But after that phone talk with my mother, something shifted. A month later, I proposed. Lena said yes, and I began preparing what I never imagined I'd do: a wedding without my family. We didn't share anything online. We did not send out any announcements. I contacted Aunt Nadine privately and told her the entire thing. She hugged me over the phone. "You have every right, Eli," she stated. "You deserve to be celebrated, not stepped on." She assisted us with selecting a venue. It was a small, comfortable old manor residence approximately an hour from the city. Elegant, without being overly dramatic. Lena's family was thrilled. They helped with everything, including flowers, cake, and invitations. I'd never felt more supported in my life. I sent out actual invitations that were professionally addressed and included a simple RSVP card, but neither my parents nor Ava received them. I did not block them. I did not make any announcements online. I simply allowed the stillness to linger, just as they would with me. 3 weeks later, I received a text from my cousin Tessa. It was a photograph of my wedding invitation laying on Aunt Nadine's kitchen counter. The caption stated, "Your mom just saw this. She's not doing well." Then my phone started ringing. It was my mom. I did not pick up. Then my father. Then Avenue. I let all calls go to voicemail. And then, at 11:07 p.m., I received a message that simply said, "Noah, please." We didn't mean it like that. I looked at the screen for a long time. My heart was beating, not from guilt, but from understanding. They only reached out since they had been excluded already. They had no idea what would happen next. The following morning, I awoke to 5 more missed calls and 2 voicemails from my mother, her voice cracking. One message begins with, "Please call me," and ends with suppressed tears. The other was quieter. "We're your family, Noah. This isn't right. You're being cruel." The word cruel stayed with me like a splinter. It repeated in my head as I washed my teeth, buttoned my shirt, and poured coffee into the travel mug Lena had given me months ago, which featured the future groom inscribed in gold calligraphy. Cruel. As if I hadn't spent the previous decade suppressing my pride while they fated Ava as if she were the only child who counted. As if I hadn't smiled through insult after insult, been ignored through every birthday, promotion and major occasion in my life, all of which they dismissed as background noise for the Ava show. Cruel? This was the first time I'd just stepped out of their shadow. By that afternoon, the group conversation, the dreaded family chat that I'd long ago muted, had erupted like wildfire. I did not even open it at first. I watched the previews. Has anyone else gotten this? Wait, Noah's getting married? Why were we not invited? Nadine, did you know? Ava sent one message that stood out. This is petty, Eli. You are acting like a child. Petty, right? I typed, erased, and typed again before sending a single response. I'm simply adhering to the restrictions you've all set. You made it plain where I stand inside this family. I'm not bitter. I'm just beyond pretending it doesn't hurt. I turned off alerts after that. I did not need their approval. I was not doing this to prove a point. I was doing this because, for once, I wanted to begin a new chapter without carrying the previous grief with me. But of course, my family was not going to give it up that quickly. A few days later, Lena and I were meeting with the florist when my father arrived. He strode inside the shop without a warning or text, like if he owned it. He appeared exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. But there was the same grim tightening in his jaw that I recalled from boyhood, the expression that said, "You're disappointing me." "Can we talk?" he inquired. Lena looked at me, hesitant. "It's okay," I told her. "Give us a minute." She nodded and stepped out. My father sat down across from me, folding his hands on the small circular table. "This has gone far enough, Noah." "Has it?" I inquired evenly. "You've made your point, you're upset, fine. But punishing your mother like this, leaving her out of her only son's wedding." I blinked. Only son. It was the first time I had heard him refer to me like that in years. "I didn't set out to punish anyone, I told you. But you all left me out of Ava's engagement, didn't even tell me it was happening." "That's different," he murmured. "Ava needed..." "Needed what?" I said, louder than I meant. "A perfect day? And you thought I'd ruin it just by showing up?" He looked away. I continued going. "You made me feel like a threat to my own sister's happiness. Like one was poisoned. And you never once asked how that felt." He exhaled. "We didn't think it would matter so much to you. You've always been independent. That's code for, we thought you'd take it and be quiet." "I always did." He became silent again. I could tell in his eyes that he didn't know what to say, not because he didn't have any excuses, but because this was the first time he'd ever been asked to listen to me rather than thinking I'd just go along with it. "We're not trying to hurt you," he said quietly. "We just thought you didn't care." I stood up. "That's the problem. You never thought to check." He looked up at me. "Can we at least come to the wedding?" I paused for a second. I wanted to answer yes. I wanted to think that he meant it. But then I remembered every year I spent watching them shout for Ava while pretending I wasn't there. Every time they turned birthdays and holidays into background noise unless she was the focal point, every phone call I initiated, never the other way around. I took a deep breath. "I think maybe this time, you need to feel what it's like to be left out." He didn't protest, simply nodded slowly and went out of the shop. Later that evening, I told Lena everything. She didn't say anything, simply wrapping her arms around me and resting her head on my shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. And I believed her. But it didn't end there. A week later, a photo of a fuzzy invitation on Nadine's fridge began to circulate among family members. Someone posted it to Facebook. Then another cousin commented on it. Suddenly my secret engagement was out in the open. People started texting again. Not just my parents, but distant cousins whom I hadn't seen in years. Some congratulate me, while others accuse me of being nasty, greedy, and ungrateful. Then Ava wrote a long text on her Instagram story with a black background. Some people would sooner burn bridges than recognize their harmful behavior. It's awful when your own brother is so bitter that he eliminates his family from his wedding to gain attention. I stared at it for quite a while. Then I screenshotted it and posted my own post the next morning, with a photo of Lena and myself laughing in the sun while holding hands in front of the venue we'd chosen. There's no caption, only the date. I did not tag anyone. I didn't need to because the next message I got was not from Ava. It was from my mother. A single sentence. Please do not do this, Noah. Please let us arrive. I stared at the message for a long time. Then something happened that altered everything. Something I didn't expect. Something made me understand that this story was no longer merely about a wedding. It was about restoring something I hadn't had for years. And it all began with a knock on my door. It happened on a calm Saturday morning. One of those sluggish golden mornings when sunshine collects in the corners of the living room and everything appears to be still. Lena had left early for a final dress fitting with her sister, and I was at home alone, sipping coffee in sweatpants and poring over the final guest list. The knock was gentle and cautious, as if the person on the other end wasn't sure they wanted to be there. I opened the door and froze. Avenue. She looked different. Not physically, but she still had that wonderfully put-together look, the kind that says effortless while clearly requiring hours. But there was something in her eyes that I had not seen since we were children. Uncertainty. Perhaps even guilt. We stood in silence for a long time before she spoke. Can I come in? I did not say yes. I simply stepped aside and let her in. She walked by me as if she didn't know what to do with her hands, pausing just short of the couch and hovering like a ghost. Nice place, she remarked, before catching herself. I mean, of course it is. You've always had good taste. I did not respond. I just leaned against the wall, waiting. She turned to face me, breathing as if she were plunging underwater. Look, I know you're mad, and I get it. I do. But I didn't know Mom didn't invite you to the engagement party. I swear. I crossed my arms without thinking. You didn't notice I wasn't there? Her jaw stiffened. I figured you were busy. Or maybe you were just doing your usual too cool for this thing. I nearly laughed. Right. The same way I was too cool for every other event I was quietly left out of. She grimaced. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. You hijacked my promotion announcement at Christmas. You've taken over every birthday, every holiday, and I never once said a word until now. She stared down at her shoes, biting her bottom lip as she had when we were youngsters and she was caught smuggling chocolates. I didn't mean to make everything about me, she admitted gently. It's just, that's how Mom and Dad are. They always push me to be the star. I guess I got used to it. That doesn't make it okay, I responded. They taught you to act as if I were optional, and you never questioned it. Once again, silence fell between us. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the groan of the floors beneath her feet. She eventually looked up. Why didn't you tell me about the wedding? Her voice was full of perplexity and hurt, not hatred. I wanted peace, I explained. I wanted one thing in my life that didn't come with baggage. Didn't come with expectations or backhanded comments or being made to feel like I don't belong. I wanted a clean start. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You could have told me. Just me. I shake my head. I didn't trust you. That hurt her. I could see it. Maybe a small part of me wanted it. I'm not asking you to invite Mom, she explained. Or Dad. I'm not even asking you to. Forgive me right now. But can I be there? Please? Just me. It was the first time in years that I had heard her voice without that arrogant spotlight-soaked tone, just Ava, my sister, asking for something without expecting it to be handed to her. I didn't speak immediately away, because as I opened my mouth to respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. I looked at the screen, and my stomach fell. The notification came from Facebook. A post from my mother, public. When your only kid chooses to omit his family from the happiest day of his life, you have to ask what went wrong. We adored him, we reared him, and now he intends to erase us. I just hope he comes to his senses before it is too late. I gazed at it before showing it to Ava. Her eyes expanded. She posted this today? I nodded. And just like that, the moment ended. Ava's expression shifted. She appeared tired and furious, but not towards me. She promised she'd stay out of it, she grumbled. She said she'd let me try. I could not believe it, not because my mother had done something manipulative. I'd seen that playbook 100 times before, but because it became evident that this was no longer just about me. It was all about control, about appearances, about Mom and Dad's urge to have control over the story. Ava fell into the couch, burying her face in her hands. She's not even upset about missing the wedding. She's upset she doesn't get to show off at it. I did not say anything since she was correct. She glanced up at me with flaming eyes and a raspy voice. "What do you want to do?" I gently took up my phone and glanced at the Facebook post again. 100 likes. There are many of remarks from extended families. People choose sides. "I don't know yet," I replied. But I didn't. Because as much as I wanted to completely lock the door on them, I couldn't help but wonder whether the door was already being wrenched off its hinges. But I wasn't going to let them spin their story uncontested. Not this time. And as Ava sat motionless on my couch, appearing smaller than I'd ever seen her, a fresh thought germinated, one they'd never expect. One they could never spin. And it all began with a list. I was about to update a specific guest list. Ava sat with her elbows on her knees and rubbed her temples as if she had a migraine. I felt the weight of her quiet as I roamed the living room. The Facebook post remained open on my phone screen like a smack in the face, reminding me that no matter how quiet I tried to be, my family always found a way to flip the narrative against me. "She made it public," I admitted finally. "She made me public. Turned this into some kind of sob story so she could play the victim again." Ava did not argue. She simply shook her head. "She told me she wouldn't say anything. I told her to let me try first." "She doesn't care what you say," I grumbled. "She never did." That was unfair. I knew that. But it felt right in that moment. My chest burned with an odd combination of vindication and melancholy. It was exactly what I expected, yet it still stung. I sat across from her. The notion I'd been nursing, which had started to form the moment I saw my mother's post, finally began to take shape. Something brazen. "I want to change the guest list," I announced. Ava looked up, shocked. "To what?" I glanced at her, considering the risk. "I'll let you come. And Aunt Nadine. And Tessa. That's it." She blinked. "You're serious?" "You're the only one who showed up to say anything in person. The only one who owned up to what's been going on. You don't deserve to be punished for their choices." Ava nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. "But," I continued, holding up a hand, "don't expect forgiveness overnight. This isn't some magical reunion. It's one small step." "I get that," she responded, standing up. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you years ago." I didn't respond. I only nodded once before she went. That night, I showed Lena the post. She read it thoughtfully and then looked at me. "Do you want to respond?" she inquired. "I do," she replied. "But not online. I want to respond in person on our terms." Her eyebrows furrowed. "What are you thinking?" I grinned for the first time in several hours. "I want to make our wedding about us, not them. But if they're going to paint me as the villain for taking control of my life, then maybe it's time I embrace it. Just once." Lena did not even hesitate. "Then let's make this wedding unforgettable." The wedding day began with a peculiar electric quiet. The sky was perfectly blue, and the air was light and comfortable. We'd decided to have it outside, beneath the arching trees of the manor garden. Flowers lined the route. Soft piano music floated from the speakers, and visitors began to arrive, their voices filled with soft enthusiasm. People who mattered. People who knew and supported us, saw us. Nadine arrived first, dabbing her eyes and hugging me. "Your parents are losing their minds right now," she said with a chuckle. "Ava told me your mom threw her phone across the room this morning." "Maybe now she knows how it feels," I remarked with a shrug. Then Ava arrived. For the first time in her life, she did not attempt to steal the attention. She wore a simple pastel dress and minimal makeup, hugging Lena as if they were longtime friends. She didn't say much, just sat silently with Nadine and Tessa toward the front, watching everything with an expression I didn't recognize on her face. Perhaps pride, perhaps guilt, perhaps both. The ceremony was brief but wonderful. When I saw Lena go down the aisle, every bitter thought and emotion from the past vanished into something soft. She was glowing. We exchanged vows beneath a canopy of leaves, kissed too. The sound of our closest friends cheering, and walked down the aisle hand in hand. We didn't need a crowd. We simply needed each other. People at the reception laughed, danced, and toasted us with emotional speeches. I considered making my own speech, a subtle veiled message to the relatives who had abandoned me, something beautiful. But I did not. Instead, I concentrated on the joy surrounding me. For once, I did not feel like a supporting character. I was living my story. The true surprise came when the cake was served. A waiter approached me warily, holding a tiny envelope. "This was just delivered at the front gate," he informed me. "They said it was urgent." I grimaced and accepted it, standing aside to open it. Inside was a note written in my mother's handwriting. Noah. We viewed the photographs. We saw the post. We know we have hurt you more than we realized. I do not expect forgiveness, but I do want you to understand something. You were never unwelcome. We were simply too blind and ignorant to show you the love you deserve. I made mistakes. I made many of them. But today, I witnessed what you've created, and I've never been prouder of you. I'm hoping that one day you would allow us to try again. Mom. I stood there for a time, holding the paper with quivering hands. Lena approached, concern in her eyes. Everything okay? I handed her the note. She read it and glanced at me. What do you want to do? I did not respond right away. I looked out at the garden, the guests laughing, and the golden light of sunset falling on everything like a benediction. My mother's note did not undo years of damage. It didn't take away the agony, the absence, or the way they made me feel insignificant. But that was a start. A slow, bumbling human start. I don't know yet, I replied. But I know one thing. What's that? I turned to face her, took her hand and smiled. This is the happiest day of my life. And nothing is going to take that from me. A month later, we were returning from our honeymoon and sorting through wedding photos when the doorbell rang. Lena answered. I heard her speaking softly to someone, then footsteps approaching me. My mother stood there in the hallway. No makeup. There is no perfect hair. It's just pants, a cardigan, and red eyes. She did not say anything, only held out a tiny wooden box. I opened it. Inside were all of my childhood photos, which I had feared were lost. Birthday parties. School awards. I wrote a handwritten Father's Day card for my father when I was 7 years old. She looked up at me, her voice trembling. I found this in the attic last week. Thought you'd thrown it all away. But I couldn't. I didn't say anything, I simply nodded and took the box. It would take time. Perhaps years. Perhaps a little longer. But for the first time in my life, the spotlight wasn't important. I wasn't the extra anymore.